What's up, Irish Breakdown Nation? We are back. It is a Thursday. It is August 7th, 2025, and we have a great topic to get after today, and it is Irish Breakdown brought to you by FanDuel, and we are excited about this. This is one of our fun prediction type shows, Trev, and we get to kind of dive in and see kind of nationally what people think about Notre Dame and what we think they're going to think about Notre Dame in the preseason and obviously as the season wears on. And so that means all American talk. And we're going to go offense, we're going to go defense, and then later on we're going to talk about Syracuse and Notre Dame's opponent towards the end of the season. I believe that is senior night for Notre Dame. So last home game of the season. And so we will preview the Orange, no longer the Orange Men. I know that happened a long time ago. But whenever I think of Syracuse, I think of the Orange Men, not the Orange, which is whatever. But Trev, how you doing today?
We're good, man. I saw our girl Karen in the chat, and this is how you know we're getting close to kickoff. She's got the countdown rolling. We are 24 days away from Notre Dame kicking off their season. I'm good, man. It's good to have this talk about All-American candidates. We get a lot of mailbag questions and buy-sell holds around, who do we think? And so what we did today is Vince and I sat down and we talked through who we believe those candidates are. And we broke them down into three different kind of categories because not all Americans are created equal. You go into the season, there's some unknowns, there's some dark horses. And so that's what we did. We separated the candidates into the obvious ones. We split it up between offense and defense. We begin with the top tier candidates, and then we're going to move and discuss about the breakout candidates. And then we're going to have some dark horse candidates, ones that may not have had a lot of production last season or throughout their college careers, but because of how we think they're going to fit into the system or what their role is going to be on this team, we think they could be a dark horse to be an All-American for Notre Dame this season. And then we're going to round it all out with predictions of who we actually think are going to become All-Americans on Notre Dame's team. I would love for it to be 11 on offense and 11 on defense, as unrealistic as that would be, but
I know, right?
It would be a fun conversation nonetheless. But Vince, I'm ready to go, man.
Yeah, we're going to have a fun convo about this whole thing anyway, because I think there's a lot of options for the various tiers that we kind of came up with. And there's a lot of talent on this team. We've been telling you guys that for a long time. This team is deep. It is very, very good at the top, but it is also very deep. And so there's maybe some breakouts that you might not think about. Maybe we're going to leave some people off the list that you think about, but you guys are more than welcome to comment in the chat as we go. That's going to be an important piece of this as well, because we want to know what you guys think, and we can kind of, bat some things around. And we've got some reasons for some of the things that we did here. And Trev and I don't agree on everything. We might move some guys around and things like that. And so I do want to not explain, but the reason Brian's not here is because this is my last day doing afternoon shows because I've got school starting up here real soon. And so he's like, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to take the day off. No nefarious reason. Nothing Notre Dame related. It's just we're going to give the boss man an afternoon off. Like, that's really all there is to it. And so yeah, Trevor and I are going to hold down the fort today, talk about some All-Americans, and Brian's going to take care of some stuff, on the back end, which is why he runs the biz, man. Like, he's the money guy, he's the planning guy, he's the brains of the operation. And so he's going to take care of some of that stuff, and we're just giving him an afternoon off. So nothing nefarious going on. I know there was some things in the chat about why Brian wasn't here. He's just taking an afternoon off, taking advantage of me being here and having an opportunity to talk to you guys one last time before school gets started. And I also would be remiss, by the way, today is my wedding anniversary. So I want to wish my wife a happy anniversary. Our wedding can now drink. It is the 21st wedding anniversary for us. And so we're going to go out and celebrate tonight, which is why I'm not going to be on the evening show. We're going to go off and do our own thing. But just want to wish her a happy anniversary before we kick this thing off, Trev. So someday you'll be lucky enough to be at the 2-1 mark. You got a long ways to go, though. I mean, it just means I'm old and you're young. That's all that means.
I am coming up on the 1 mark, though.
Yeah, that's right. You are.
September 1st is the 1 year mark. So there we go. But congratulations to you guys. That's awesome feat. Hope to get there one day.
Yeah, man, you will. You will. No doubt about that. So let's jump into this thing, Trev, and let's talk a little bit of offense first. And we're gonna go. This is how we're gonna do it, everybody, so that you guys kind of understand. We're gonna do our top tier candidates, kind of the obvious ones first. And then we're going to talk about some breakout candidates, maybe some people that are getting some preseason love or that maybe have waited their turn. And now's a great opportunity for them to break out and potentially be an All-American at season's end. And then we're going to talk about a dark horse category. And that dark horse category could be just guys that we think nobody's talking about basically, and have an opportunity to kind of break out again. Not necessarily breakout, because breakout is like guys that we're talking about a little bit. Dark horse is kind of a different category, come out of nowhere and just be that important piece and maybe have a chance to get on one of these lists. So I'm going to throw it to you. The most obvious top tier candidate, I think, of all, maybe I'll say this, the most obvious top tier candidate on the offensive side of the football, Jeremiah Love.
That's where you have to start when you have this conversation. I mean, We're talking about a guy who's just racking up preseason accolades, collecting them like they're Pokemon. You go through and you look at all that he's done. He's a Walter Camp preseason first-team All-American, Phil Steele preseason first-team All-American, Athlon Sports preseason first-team All-American, Sporting News preseason first-team All-American. He was on the Walter Camp Player of the Year award watch list. He is on the Doak Walker Award watch list. And so, we're talking about a guy who is being crowned as the number one returning running back in college football. And I think that's a general consensus, whether we're talking about PFF or CBS Sports or ESPN. Jeremiah Love is where this conversation has to start. To give you guys a window in, basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk through who it is, what they've done to get themselves onto the stage, and then what they have to do in order to earn that All-American honors. And for Jeremiah Love, Vince, it's pretty simple. You just kind of have to be the impact player that he was last season. Notre Dame's going to be starting a new quarterback under center this year, whether it's CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie. The offensive line is expected to be a little bit more experienced. And Notre Dame has about the deepest running back room in college football that I can think of off the top of my head. 1 and 2, there's debates around, Penn State or, Louisville or Texas A&M, but I think the crown kind of lives in South Bend. It's headlined by Jeremiah Love. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a kid last year who rushed for 1,125 yards. He averaged almost 7 yards a carry. He was a hair under at 6.9, 17 rushing touchdowns last year, 2 receiving touchdowns. And you and I are both under the assumption, along with Brian and a lot of other people that follow this show and this channel, that he's also going to have a much bigger impact in the passing game this year as well. Once you kind of put all those things together, Vince, Jeremiah Love is kind of a clear-cut, obvious top candidate for first-team All-American. Not just All-American. I'm very confident in saying a top candidate to be a first-team All-American player.
There's 2, right? There's usually 2 on every team, 2 running backs usually.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm with you. And look, here's the thing, and we're going to say this kind of about a lot of the All-America candidates and things of that nature, more specifically towards offensive line. But he's getting a lot of preseason love, and writers don't like to be wrong. And so if you're getting a ton of preseason love, you're going to be getting talked about throughout the season. And if he just repeats what he did last year, he's going to have a great chance of being a first-team All-American. And to your point, he is going to get more opportunities this year, I think. Is he going to get more third down opportunities? And so then those passing game numbers kind of rise a little bit, maybe a couple more receiving touchdowns, that kind of a deal. And we don't know what the rotation is going to look like in the red zone. And we don't know, what the rotation is going to look like ever. Right. And so it's just going to be an interesting situation to watch Jeremiah Love and what he's going to be able to do this year. But he's getting so much love, no pun intended, in the preseason that I feel very confident as well that he's going to be a first-team All-American when it's all said and done. I mean, he's getting too much publicity right now for that not to happen. And I don't, again, all of this entire conversation for the entire day, I don't want to say this every time, barring injury, as long as he does what he did last year with maybe a little bit of a tick up, he's going to be great. And remember, he was injured the entire postseason for the most. Like, he wasn't able to be as dynamic as we know he can be in the postseason, and still did some amazing things in the postseason.
And still was pretty dynamic in the postseason.
Right. I mean, 98 yards, still are jumping over guys, still doing all of that. But if he's healthy all year, those numbers are going to go up. And the preseason publicity, the preseason hype will just get realized, and he'll end up being a first-team All-American because of his name. People know who he is. People know who Jeremiah Love is. And it's going to be easy when it comes to voting time to vote for Jeremiah Love as long as the numbers back it up. And I think they will.
I do as well. I'm looking up right now when the All-American lists come out.
Don't they usually come out in like December, kind of in that window between bowl games and stuff?
Yeah, typically announced after the conclusion of the regular season, and bowl games often in December and January. So
okay.
I didn't know if it was something where it's like you kind of just go based on regular season. You know what I mean?
Right.
How there's like the Heisman Trophy gets decided before the bowl games start, things like that. But if Jeremiah Love is able to have the type of postseason that we think that he can have if he's healthy, you know, I mean, we're talking about somebody who had a banged up knee and had the flu, and still the first touchdown of the first ever 12-team college football playoff was a 98-yard house call by Jeremiah Love. We're talking about a special player. He's one of the most explosive players in all of college football. He had touchdown runs last year, 48, 64, 68, 76, and of course that 98-yarder that we've been talking about too. So I think far and away Jeremiah, and I think you were safe in saying I think he is the most obvious candidate on this football team to be a first-team All-American candidate.
Right.
Top of the list.
He's on the cover of the video game. He's going to, he's on the cover of everything. You know what I mean? Like, I got my Athlon Sports right here. Oh, who's that guy in the corner? Yeah, it's Jeremiah Love. You know what I mean? So, like, he's getting all of the preseason love, and I don't see that slowing down, anytime soon. So, I think he's the most obvious candidate and a very easy person to pick to start this thing off. Let's jump to the offensive line here for candidate number 2. And a guy that a year ago, I don't know that I would have predicted that we would be having this conversation about, because he was the 5th guy of a very inexperienced offensive line that we had the most questions about. And then we go through an entire season. It's like, oh, wait, Emil Wagner started every single game, was the most consistent offensive lineman that Notre Dame had on a team that went to the national championship. And so Emil Wagner, rightfully so, is getting a lot of preseason love as well.
Yeah, he is. And, I think you hit the nail on the head. He was the only offensive lineman that started and finished all 16 games for Notre Dame last year. And it's starting to reflect with some of his preseason accolades that he's starting to rack up. Not as much as what Jeremiah Love has, but again, if that's your comparison tool, then, probably should reevaluate how you're, you know what I mean? But we're still talking about somebody who's an Athlon Sports preseason second-team All-American. He's on the Outland Trophy watch list. He's on the Werfel Trophy watch list. PFF ranked him as the number 5 returning offensive tackle in college football, and Lindy Sports ranked him as the number 8 returning offensive tackle in college football. Now, there are things that he will have to work on, but just big picture, once you look at him, he's 6'6", he's long, he's athletic, he's now over 300 pounds. He just went through his series of kind of media availability interviews, and he is now consistently over 300. His weight was a topic that was covered a lot when he was talking to a lot of the beat writers. Yeah. I mean, there was a part in his interview where he talked about his sophomore year of high school. He was playing at 210 as an offensive tackle. Wow. And he was like, it's weight, getting over that magical 300 number has always been a goal of mine. And, he said now he's comfortably going into the weight room and he's not fluctuating in between that 299, 298. He's consistently over 300 and in that 305 to 300 range. So he's there. The specs are starting to fill out. We've seen him in person at practices, Vince. He looks more filled out. He looks physically bigger, but hasn't lost that athleticism. And so he's going into year 2 as a starter. He played the most snaps on anybody on Notre Dame's roster last season at 973 total snaps. It's kind of why they took it a little easy on him in the spring, kind of get the juices back flowing for him again. But that doesn't go without saying that there aren't some things he's going to have to improve on this upcoming season to be considered an All-American. For Jeremiah Love, the conversation was, just kind of, if you do what you did last season with a little bit more sprinkled in the postseason, you're probably going to be an All-American. For Emil Wagner, there are improvements that are going to have to be made. Improved pass protection is going to be a must. He allowed 29 total pressures last season, and 11 of those came in the postseason. Now, caveat to those numbers, he was probably one of their most consistent run blockers in the postseason as well. He's going to have to find a way to put that all together and be a complete tackle. But Vince, Emil Wagner, he's second on our list and top-tier candidates. I think it's kind of one of those, not as obvious as a J. Love type of player, but it's an obvious choice along the offensive line who it should be.
Well, it's an obvious choice because Notre Dame is considered to have one of the better offensive lines in the country. And then you look at why that is and who is involved. And you've got Emil Wagner is now the stalwart at right tackle, which is just mind blowing compared to, like I said, where we were a year ago. Is he going to be able to put on enough weight? He looks skinny. He looks this. He looks that. Those conversations are over. Like, we're not having those conversations anymore, which I'm thankful for, because it's just one of those topics. Is like, do we have to talk about Emil Wagner's weight again? Like, why are we continuously talking about this? I mean, and I get it. He just looks svelte when he's out there. He just looks long and lean, long arms, long legs, and just not a bunch of mass around him. And now he kind of proved, like, I got this, guys. Like, we're okay. Things are going to be okay. Now, again, he's got some holes in his game that are fixable. And with a full year starting under his belt that he got last year, again, only offensive lineman to start 16 games, he has an opportunity this offseason to kind of fix some of those holes and kind of get after it a little bit more and put that game together. And so, even more so than I mentioned with Jeremiah Love and the running back position, skill position players that have stats that you can really get after and you can compare guys and things like that. Look, we've got, hits plus sacks, and we've got pressures, and we've got things of that nature for offensive linemen. But at the end of the day, name recognition is massive when it comes to All-American lists for offensive linemen. If you are being bantied about as an offensive lineman and your name is out there, and Emil Wagner's name is out there because he is part of a very, very, very good offensive line, presumably at Notre Dame. And Notre Dame is presumably a college football playoff caliber team. His name is going to keep coming up when it comes to these lists and it comes to the voting and things like that. And so I think that's one of the reasons that I have him here as well, is because if you're getting the love in the offseason, you're going to get the love in the postseason. That's just the way it is with offensive line. We see it all the time. We even see guys get love in the postseason that probably didn't have a great regular season because they were preseason this, that, and the other, right? And they're offensive linemen, and people, a lot of writers out there, don't know how to evaluate offensive linemen. I'll just say it. They just don't. And they're like, whoa, well, he's the right tackle on the Notre Dame team that's in the playoff. He's really good then. That's what it means, In this regard, it does mean that. In regards to some other guys, it doesn't necessarily mean that. And so that's why I think he is almost a lock to be on a lot of lists when the season is over, as long as Notre Dame as a team does what they're supposed to do, Trev.
Yeah, the benefit for Emil Wagner, one, he's going into year 2 as a starter. A lot of the issues that we've been talking about, it's kind of just your first year as a starter type of issues you got to work through. But the other benefit, we're talking about somebody that's probably going to be a captain on this team. Captain of a Notre Dame offensive line, captain of a Notre Dame team that's likely going to be making another playoff run this season. And the other benefit is with a lot of All-American lists, they don't do like 2 tackles, 2 guards, and a center. A lot of times it's like 4 offensive linemen and a center. Or sometimes they'll just put 5 offensive linemen in there. There's been some years where you go and you look at All-American lists and it's 5 offensive tackles, depending on the list, or 4 offensive tackles. So they don't deviate too much between right or left, or if you're guard or a tackle. And so it's another thing that's going to work in his favor as well. But he's somebody that's definitely, to your point, compared to other positions like wide receiver that we're getting ready to talk about, it's not just you only get wide receiver and that's it. It's not just pass catchers in general. Offensive line, it's pretty broad. It's pretty general. But Notre Dame, if they have the season that we expect them to, they're probably going to be a Joe Moore Award semifinalist or even a finalist this upcoming season. He's already on the Outland Award watch list. He's already on the Werfel Trophy watch list. So there's a lot of different things that is working in his favor.
Yeah.
So that's for sure for Emil Wagner.
Well, it's like you're a pro at this already. That was a great segue into our last guy on the top tier candidates list. And it's a guy who we have personally seen in a Notre Dame helmet like 4 times. And that's only obviously at practice. And that's the transfer wide receiver, Malachi Fields, Trev.
Yeah, first and foremost, this doesn't really go into the All-American discussion, but guys, seeing him in person, pictures don't really do it justice. Videos don't really do it justice. Seeing him in person, that is a well put together football player, man. especially for what Notre Dame needs him to do for them this season, be a force in the boundary. It's not very often that cornerbacks like Leonard Moore that have that size line up across from somebody and he looks kind of small, kind of looks like a typical corner. Kind of happens a little bit when Leonard Moore lines up across from Malachi Fields. But in all seriousness, we're talking about a player who you want the definition of consistency. That's Malachi Fields, and that's what he was at Virginia in a dormant passing offense in back-to-back seasons, over 50 receptions, and back-to-back seasons over 800 yards. And when I mean consistent, I mean within 2 to 3 receptions. I mean within 2 to 3 yards. In 2023, he had 811 receiving yards, and then last year he had 808. He had 5 receiving touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. Those performances is what landed him on a couple of lists. He's Lindy Sports number 17 returning wide receiver in college football this year. He is on the 2025 Biletnikoff Award watch list. He was PFF's honorable mention, top 10 returning wide receivers in college football, and he was also deemed ESPN's most impactful transfer for Notre Dame this upcoming year. So Malachi Fields is starting to generate a little bit of the offseason attention that we haven't really seen a Notre Dame wide receiver get in past years. I've seen some mock drafts of him going as like a day 2 type of guy. When's the last time we talked about a Notre Dame wide receiver potentially going early in the NFL draft before the season started?
Hey, don't forget about the one, I don't even know who it was, but it sticks in my mind. The one person that put him as the number 8 overall pick in the NFL draft. I was like, whoa, what? But hey, somebody out there thinks that Malachi Fields is the top 10 NFL draft pick. I don't know who it is, but it's probably more so that, there's his truth, your truth, and someplace in the middle. It's probably someplace in the middle, obviously, but the fact that you're, to your point, a day 2 draft pick at wide receiver at Notre Dame right now is a welcome addition.
Oh, absolutely. Now, when we talk about like a transfer coming in and making a list like this, there's obviously almost a to-do list of some of the things that they're going to have to do to reach that feat. So, Vince, when you look at somebody like Malachi Fields, what does he have to do to earn an All-American honor selection at the end of the year?
Well, obviously, he's going to have to be the alpha at Notre Dame. And I think, there's still a question as to who the alpha is going to be, whether it's Jaden Greathouse, whether it's going to be Malachi Fields, and what does that look like? Could they both be alphas on this team? If that's the case, then okay, fantastic, let's roll. But can he be the alpha on an offense whose passing game is very good to elite? And we think that whoever the quarterback is, they're going to have weapons to throw to, and it's going to be a kind of a new look offense to the average fan that's watching this Notre Dame football team. A lot of RPOs, obviously, but I think some of those RPOs are going to end up being throws as opposed to runs, this year. And so that's going to look like a more prolific passing game. And the recipient of that is going to be guys like Malachi Fields. And so he's going to have to put up the numbers. I mean, bottom line, and I think we're probably going to jump into this a little bit more when we have our actual predictions for who's going to get an All-America nod at the end of our offensive section here. Just a lot of talent at wide receiver. So he's going to have to put up some numbers, and those numbers are going to have to be comparable to some of those other guys. And what we've seen at practice so far, they are getting him the football in a lot of different ways. I'm not going to get into details because I don't want to, get in trouble. But at the same time, they are doing a lot of different things to get Zero the football. And that's exciting. And so they know that they've got talent in Malachi Fields, and they know they want the football in his hands. And so if he can reward Mike Denbrock with that trust and, do what he's supposed to do with the football in his hands, then I think he's got a shot. And he's getting some preseason love as well. And that is obviously very, very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, simply put, he's just got to be who Notre Dame expects him to be in the boundary this year. Gives him a lethal weapon in there, gives him a legitimate red zone threat down there in the red zone, in the scoring zone. So as long as Malachi Fields is what Notre Dame thinks that he's going to be, what we believe him to be, he's going to be well in contention for that list. But like you brought up, Vince, there's a lot of steep competition at receiver this year for some of those. We'll dive more into that later. But that's kind of when it comes into how do you balance the finite amount of spots versus what we believe Malachi Fields to be. And that's going to be a really interesting conversation moving forward. That's for sure.
Yeah. So let's move into our next category, and that is what we have termed breakout candidates, and we've got 3 guys here that we are going to talk about on the offensive side of the football, and guys that we think have a ton of talent and have an opportunity to really kind of turn some heads this year. And the first guy, we'll go back to the offensive line. We will go to the guard position with Billy Schrouth. Trev.
Yeah, Billy Schrouth might be one of the best interior offensive linemen in the country that not a lot of people are talking about. He hasn't made any, I don't believe, any preseason All-American lists. He's on the Outland Trophy watch list. He's there alongside Emil Wagner. But Billy Schrouth, when he's on the field, and I'm assuming that's kind of what has held him off of a lot of these lists, is, in 2023, he didn't get put into the starting lineup until the final 3 games. And then in 24, starts out hot, gets hurt, misses a handful of games, but then returns. So he now has 15 career starts under his belt. But we put Billy Schrouth at the top of the breakout candidates list because it's for everything that he brings to the table. We're talking about an interior offensive lineman. He's 6'4", he's 315 pounds, 310 pounds, somewhere in that range. But he has 15 career starts, and we're talking about an interior guy who didn't allow a single pressure from Georgia to Ohio State last year in the postseason. And if you guys recall, those are some pretty decent defensive lines that they were going against. And when I mean didn't allow a pressure, I don't mean not a sack or not a hit on the quarterback. I mean a single pressure. And that's going up against guys like Zane Durant, going up against guys like Tyleek Williams, and going up against guys like Nazir Stackhouse. That is an impressive list of interior defensive linemen to go against to not allow a single pressure. For Billy Schrouth, it's simple. And I know we're trying to stay away from as long as they stay healthy. But for him, legitimately, if he can stay on the field, he's going to be well in the conversation for some sort of offensive line, first or second team All-American, because he's that good. Now it's just about piecing it together consistently. If he stays healthy and is their left guard for 14, 15, 16 games and can repeat that level of performance, I think Billy Schrouth is going to be well in the conversation, Vince.
I'm a big fan of Billy Schrouth. Bottom line, big fan of Billy. And Sean and I, we kind of ran out of time last night on the show. We were going to talk. He wanted me to pick like savages on both sides of the football, and my offensive one was going to be Billy Schrouth. The kid's a savage. I think he is overlooked to a degree because the other guard is Charles Jagisaw. He gets a lot of the publicity. Now, he's out, at least for the first few games, to our knowledge. We don't know exactly when he's going to be back. He'll be back at some point. This is going to give Billy an opportunity to really kind of make a name for himself nationally. Look, we all know who Billy Schrouth is. If you follow Notre Dame, you know who Billy Schrouth is. You know the talent level of Billy Schrouth. You're excited about who Billy Schrouth could be. I think he's going to have an opportunity to really show America who Billy Schrouth is, and that's why he's on this list. He could break through and be one of the leaders on this offensive line. It's just, can he do enough to turn enough heads to get on one of these lists? And that's the biggest question. I think this is going to be a breakout season for him regardless. And we're going to see that as people that cover Notre Dame, people that watch every game of Notre Dame, people that are Notre Dame fans, we're going to see it. Is it going to be enough to turn heads nationally? That's the biggest question mark for me. I think he's talented enough to be on an All-America list. I absolutely do. I think he's one of the best guards in the country, or could be one of the best guards in the country. Is it going to be enough to turn enough heads? I don't know. That's the biggest question mark for me. Is he going to be, Quentin Nelson had head-turning plays. You know what I mean? Like against Georgia where the kid was blitzing off the right side. He's playing left guard and comes over and just decapitates the kid. You know what I mean? Like that's one that they played on a loop. We saw it at the NFL draft, for goodness sakes. Is he going to have plays like that are going to stand out and that people are really going to pay attention to? I don't know. And that's why he's on a breakout list and not a guarantee list like at the top. But he's one of the first guys that we wanted to talk about at the breakthrough area.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It falls in line with when we went back and we started talking about bold predictions for the offensive line. My bold prediction was that Billy Schrouth was going to end this season as Notre Dame's best offensive lineman, and I don't know if it's going to be overly close. He has that type of potential to him, especially when you start talking about his performance on the field, because what he doesn't have is kind of the eye-popping measurables that like a Quentin Nelson has or like a Caden Proctor at Alabama, who he is a tackle, but I mean, he's like 350 pounds and he's 6'6", he's 6'7". Billy Schrouth is on paper kind of one of your run-of-the-mill interior offensive linemen. He's 6'4", he's like 310, hover somewhere in that area. But if he's able to stay consistently on the football field, I agree with you completely. He is one of the best interior offensive linemen in the country, and I think he's going to put people on notice this year. That is for sure. But along the lines of putting people on notice, Jaden Greathouse put a lot of people on notice last year in the final 2 playoff games for Notre Dame. He is next on our breakout list. Don't worry, Salty. We were going to make sure that we covered Jaden Greathouse here for you today in this conversation. Not to worry, man. But in all seriousness, there's some people that will maybe push back on the notion of him being a breakout candidate, considering what he did last year in the postseason. But Vince, Jaden Greathouse is definitely a player that needed to be on this list for us for sure.
Well, and again, lots of wide receivers to talk about here, and we are still questioning as to who the alpha is going to be at Notre Dame. Is it going to be Jaden Greathouse? Is it going to be Malachi Fields? Is it going to be both? Is it going to be none? We don't know the answer to that. I think it's the same at this point, that he had a very, very good end of his 24 season, and we're all excited to see how he builds on that in 25. I mean, he has the opportunity to do that. Is he going, bringing in Malachi Fields is a good thing here, because Jaden Greathouse is going to be, not arguably, he was going to be the best wide receiver that Notre Dame had returning. And then he was going to get double teamed and he was going to get a lot of attention. Well, now you bring in Malachi Fields, and now you've got both of those guys that are high-level wide receivers. And so now it's kind of a pick your poison situation. Are you going to double, Malachi? Are you going to double Jaden? Are you going to play some split coverage? Like, what is the plan when you've got 2 really good guys? And then, of course, you throw in Jordan Faison and Will Pauling and everything else that Notre Dame has at wide receiver. This is going to give an opportunity to Jaden Greathouse to break out. And that's why he's on this list. He turned a lot of heads in the postseason. There's no doubt about that. The question still remains as to whether he can do it for a full season. And we're going to have a great opportunity to see that this year. And he has not been a part of a dynamic offense yet, Trev. They were not a pass-first offense last year with Riley Leonard. They were really good at other things, but they were not a pass-first offense. They arguably may be a pass-first offense this year, and that will benefit both Malachi and Jaden.
Yeah, they certainly have the potential to be that. I mean, we're talking about somebody who he hasn't been on many watch lists. He's not on, I believe, any preseason All-American lists, but he is, on Lindy's list. He's the Lindy Sports number 9 returning wide receiver in college football. ESPN named him as a top breakout candidate for Notre Dame this upcoming season. For Jaden Greathouse, it comes down to consistency. There's a lot of talk around what he did in the postseason to end Notre Dame's magical year, rightfully so. I mean, he went for 7 for 105 and a touchdown against Penn State, and he went for 6 for 128 and 2 touchdowns against Ohio State in the national championship, the biggest possible stage that you can play on in college football. If you just look at that in a vacuum, Jaden Greathouse arguably should be in the no-brainer category that we got done talking about a little bit earlier. But then you look at what he did the rest of the season, and not all of it was his fault, but he also had 7 games last year with just 1 catch. And so what is going to be the real Jaden Greathouse season now that they are in a more pass-friendly offense, now that he does kind of have a complement in the offense to him? Notre Dame, for the first time, arguably since 2015, is going to have a legitimate 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position with Malachi Fields and Jaden Greathouse. What is that going to look like from him? Are we going to see more of the Jaden Greathouse that we saw against Florida State, that we saw against Louisville, that we saw against Texas A&M? I mean, even Northern Illinois, people walk away from that and say, the drop slot fade that he had. He still had 5 catches for 41 yards. We're talking about a wide receiver who gained, it was somewhere in the teens. Can't remember the number off the top of my head, but he is somebody that I think led the team in first down receptions last year. Very reliable target in Mike Denbrock's offense. And so is it going to be more of what we saw from him in those performances with some of the Penn State, Ohio State type of performances mixed in there? Or is it going to remain a little bit more of the inconsistencies with him? That is going to be the ultimate deciding factor, I believe, whether Jaden Greathouse is going to end up on an All-American team or not, mixed in with a couple of other factors that we'll get into later. But ultimately, if he's able to stay at a consistent level, he puts himself right up there in the conversation to be an All-American.
I think our last one in the breakout category might be the most controversial, at least amongst Notre Dame fans, because of the way he was inserted into the starting lineup last year, but you can't argue with the results. And that young man's name is Anthony Knapp. And Anthony Knapp was one of the most talked about guys at Notre Dame throughout the entire season, for good, for bad, for whatever. But he was. And he's still one of the most talked about players on the Notre Dame offense this offseason going into year 2. And so, but at the end of the day, what he was able to do through the season in 15 starts, obviously he got hurt at the end of the season, but in 15 starts, becoming a freshman All-American, being a true freshman, playing left tackle at Notre Dame, there's some pretty lofty names that he also gets to put his name next to who have been able to do that. Anthony Knapp has an opportunity to do something here this year because people know who he is.
That's a great point that you brought up about Emil Wagner with name recognition. That goes a long way. Anthony Knapp, when you're the starting left tackle at Notre Dame as a true freshman, that turns heads. We can have a debate around his level of performance over the course of the season and what the competition looks like this offseason. Those are valid conversations to have. But fact of the matter is, when you're the starting left tackle at Notre Dame as a true freshman, you will get national attention. It's no mystery to me that he ended up on a freshman All-American list and on a freshman All-American team. But the job is far from finished with Anthony Knapp. On one hand, you look at the level of competition that he went up against last year. He was going up against guys like JT Tuimoloau. He was going up against Mikhail Kamara, who was an all Big Ten defensive end last year for IU. In his first start, he was going up against Nick Scorton at Texas A&M, who transferred in from Purdue, who in 2023 was the Big Ten sack leader. He was tied for the lead in Big Ten in sacks. And so he is somebody that has a lot of experience, a lot of big game experience. Excuse me. I guess he didn't go against JT Tuimoloau. He was out for the national championship game against Ohio State. But he also went against Denai Dennis Sutton, against Penn State in the first half. So he's somebody that has big picture, the experience that you need to tee yourself up now going into your second year as a full-time starter at Notre Dame at left tackle to be an All-American. So why is he on the breakout list? It's because there is a ways for him to go. I would make the argument that in our breakout category, I think Anthony Knapp has the farthest to go in comparison to Billy Schrauth and Jaden Greathouse. Vince, I don't know if you agree with that, but I would say in comparison of the three, I think he has the farthest to go from an on-the-field performance standpoint. Because for all the good things that he did last year, we also can't turn a blind eye to some of the areas of improvement that he needs to have. He led the team last year and allowed a team-high 31 pressures last season and didn't play in the last game and a half. Now, all of the things that we have heard and have seen so far this offseason is that he's really putting in the work to get better in the areas that really count. He's already a dominant run blocker. He needs to continue ascending there and just do it at a more consistent level. But from a pass blocking standpoint, again, in Emil Wagner's press interview yesterday, during his media availability, he talked about the improvements that Anthony Knapp was making. And in some of the practices that you and I got to see, Vince, when we were there with Brian and Sean, we kind of saw hints of what Anthony Knapp was doing to make those improvements that was needed for this year. So when you look at what he needs to do this season, improve pass protection. The same can be said for Emil Wagner. But continue being a dominant run blocker and improve your pass protection. The eyes are already on you being the starting left tackle at Notre Dame.
Right. And he's still a true sophomore. Like,
yep.
Seems like we've been talking about Anthony Knapp for a really, really long time, and it's been less than a year, basically.
I feel like Anthony Knapp has been at Notre Dame since 2019.
I know, right? I mean, it was, I don't know, I can't say for exact, but he didn't, roll into the starting job or was taking reps with the starting job until after they were in full pads, obviously. And so we're just now knocking on that door at Notre Dame. So we're talking less than a year that Anthony Knapp has been, coming out of the mouths of Notre Dame fans. He was just an afterthought as a true freshman coming in and learning the offense and all of those things. And then all of a sudden he's the starting left tackle at Notre Dame and becomes a freshman All-American. So, I mean, the rise of Anthony Knapp has been prestigious, but I think the rise needs to continue for him at this point. Now, look, Notre Dame is forecasted to be one of the top offensive lines in the country. That's with Anthony Knapp at left tackle. Like, people need to remember that too. People are projecting him to be and take that next step, be very good at left tackle. And, as long as he continues his progression and he continues his development, he's going to be really good. We'll just have to see, will he be at All-America status this year? I don't know the answer to that. He's going to have to take a pretty massive step for that to be the case, but I still think he belongs in the conversation because he's still the left tackle at Notre Dame, and he's still the left tackle on a team that has Joe Moore, connotations to it, and a team that's going to be in the college football playoff in theory. Like, those are all things that are true. And when that happens, you look at the left tackle as a big part of that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, even though it is a big step he has to take, it's one that we're confident that he's capable of making. Mm-hmm. That's the nice part about this conversation, is we're not having a discussion around a player that has to play above his God-given ability. And that is a really good spot to be in. Improvements have to be made, yes, but also at the same time, Notre Dame is 14-1 with Anthony Knapp starting at left tackle. That is also a fact. Now, yes, it is not just because he is the left tackle at Notre Dame. There's a lot of other factors in there. But for some of the people that think that Notre Dame's season is going to be washed because of him there, it's not the case. Anthony Knapp absolutely deserves to be on this list somewhere in one of these categories. But the next guy that we're going to talk about, Vince, also lies along the offensive line. And this is kind of where you and I had our first, kind of a open discussion around, should he be in the breakout category or should he be in the dark horse category? I'm going to pass this one back over to you, Vince, because I know this is your boy.
Yeah, if anybody watches this show on a regular basis, and we know IB Nation does that because they're an extremely loyal fan base, that I'm high on Ashton Craig. And I think that he has the opportunity to be one of the best centers in college football, in the conversation. And look, he needs to stay healthy. And I said I wasn't going to say that about guys, as long as they stay healthy, blah, blah, blah. But it's true. I mean, he's coming off a season-ending injury, and he needs to show that he can do it for a full season. If he can, I think he could be one of the best centers in the country. And, it is center's a very unique position. It just is, right? You have to be good at a lot of different things to play center. And it's not easy to snap the ball, fire out, do all of those different things. I think Ashton Craig is a very good run blocker. I think he's a leader on this team. I think all of those things. And he's an afterthought for a lot of fans. It's, should they move Anthony Knapp into center? Should they move, so-and-so into center? Just completely forgetting about Ashton Craig, which makes me annoyed. I don't like it. I don't like people not thinking about Ashton Craig. Okay. That's the biggest thing for me. I did put him in to the breakout category because I think he can be that guy. He is back to starting. He looks good in the practices that we've seen him in. I think he's a leader. I have seen him, coaching up other linemen on this line, coaching up his backup, doing all of those things. I'm just a huge fan of Ashton Craig. And again, he's not going to be on a lot of preseason lists because he was injured most of the year last year. He's not going to be, at least I don't think so. He's not going to be the outspoken, crazy pre-game speech guy that the backup center was last year, who ended up being the full-time center, who's not on the team anymore. I just think he's steady Eddie. He is aggressive. He is powerful. And he, like I said, he has an opportunity to be really, really good this year. And look, we're splitting hairs when I want to put him in the breakout category and you want to put him in the dark horse category. It's splitting hairs. We both thought of Ashton Craig for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was thinking dark horse, when I was talking to Vince about this before the show started, it was more so in the eyes of the media because he's not gaining a lot of national attention. I think the only list that I saw him on, CBS Sports, like way back in like April, I believe, put out a list of like the top 140 players in college football that were coming back. And I think Ashton Craig was like number 122. Now, I think that might've been the only list that he was on.
Yeah.
He has to stay on the field. Has to. But when he is on the field, he's undeniably good. I mean, you go and you look at what he's done when he's been in games. In 2 years playing in games, Ashton Craig has never allowed a sack, and he's only allowed one hit on the quarterback. One. That's impressive. That is really, really impressive. if he's able to stay on the field, there's no doubt in my mind that he skyrockets up the rankings for people in terms of top centers in college football. He absolutely deserved to be somewhere on this list. The question just became where.
Yeah.
And so when you look at what his potential brings to this offensive line unit, I think to Vince's point, he's going to be kind of one of the keys that holds together, an inexperienced right guard to his right, but then he can also feed off of a veteran presence in Billy Schrauth to his left. And now that you have 31 combined starts between your two tackles that are coming back, it puts Notre Dame in a really strong spot for their offensive line this upcoming year. But Ashton Craig absolutely needed to be on this list. And if he's able to piece together a full season, it's going to be a really, really strong one for him.
Yeah, and I was obviously I'm high on Ashton Craig regardless. And when you pair him up with the two guards that were on either side of him a month ago, it was like, okay. Because a lot of times a center is double teaming and then they climb to the next level and those kinds of things. Rarely is a center one-on-one with somebody unless it's an odd front. There's a guy on his head, that kind of a thing. And then you find out what centers are made of, obviously. But when you're double teaming with Billy Schrauth on one side, Charles Jagasaw on the other, good things are going to happen. You know what I mean? And he is going to be the recipient of that. Now, you've got Sullivan Absher now at right guard, at least for the first few games, maybe longer, depending on how things go. Dude's a mountain of a man. Like the double teams are still going to be prolific. Like I'm still excited about what that looks like. But look, Ashton Craig is going to benefit from being in between whatever guards that Notre Dame puts on the field. And right now they're putting guys on the field that are really, really, really good. And he will benefit from that. And they're going to move guys in the middle of this. If any defense that they play, they're going to move guys around. And then running backs are going to have big holes to run through. And you're going to see the backside of number 70 an awful lot as, running backs are sailing through the middle of this offense. So I'm very excited about what Ashton Craig could be. And he has the opportunity, if things go right, to be in the conversation at the end of the year, Trev. I really do think that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there was one reason, if I could just point to one why I was disappointed that Ashton Craig wasn't able to finish the season, there is a host of reasons as to why. Watching him go toe-to-toe with Nazir Stackhouse and Georgia's odd front, play in and play out, would have been electric. One that you would have wanted a front row seat to see. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that, but hopefully this year we get to see some sort of that. But again, Ashton Craig's going to have a great season for Notre Dame. Very, very confident in that for sure.
Our final, I believe it's our final, right? We had two. Yeah, our final dark horse candidate in this discussion is another guy who is coming off injury from a while back, but injuries in his past that have prevented him from really being a breakout player at Notre Dame up to this point. But everything that we have seen in 2025, whether it be on the press tour in New York and some of those still shots in his medium t-shirt or what we've seen on the practice field as well, we would be remiss if we didn't bring up, look, it's tight end U, right? If we didn't bring up Eli Raridan.
The tight end room to me is what Ashton Craig is to you, Vince. And there is not an episode that goes by that I don't try to fit in some sort of conversation around the tight ends. I'll find some way to work it in. We could be talking about the DB. We could be talking about the defensive backs room, and I'll find a way to sneak in a tight end comment in there. But in all seriousness, Eli Raridan is somebody who is on the verge of a major breakout. But the reason why we put him in dark horse is because last season he had 11 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. He doesn't have the production to kind of back putting him into the breakout category. Argument could be made, yes, he has to have a breakout this year.
Sure.
I think that he kind of unlocks the potential to Notre Dame's passing game reaching its full ceiling. I really do. If you're in, let's say you're in a 2-by-1 on offense and you have the tight end off to the right and Malachi Fields in the boundary. You got a 6'7", 251-pound tight end and a 6'4", 225-pound boundary receiver. That unlocks the potential of Notre Dame's full force of a vertical passing game. And if Eli Raridan has the season that I believe that he's capable of, and I do think he's also going to benefit from it being somewhat of a, like, I don't want to say like a down year for tight end across college football, because, you still have Max Clare at Ohio State. You got the kid at Vanderbilt. But Eli Raridan, if he has a season that we believe he's capable of having, is somebody that could skyrocket up people's lists. I truly believe that. He's very athletic. He has a diverse skill set. If he's able to return to true form as a blocker and be the pass catcher that we've seen him be in the Jersey scrimmage and in the blue gold game and in moments in fall camp, then I think he's absolutely going to shoot up people's lists as far as All-American is concerned. But he's stepping into the tight end role, the tight end one role. We've seen in years past players going from not having done a whole lot in the previous year to stepping into that role and having a really big breakout season. Troy Nicholas in 2013, Cole Kmet in 2019. We've seen it. I mean, for a short spurt of time, Mitchell Evans going from 2022 to 2023 also had that sort of breakout. I really was hoping to see him fully healthy for a 23 season to see what Mitchell Evans could have done with the run that he was getting ready to go on. But unfortunately, we know how that story played out. But I think Eli Raridan is poised for a really, really big year, Vince.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt about it. He is a big target for an inexperienced quarterback. Whoever the quarterback is going to be, that's one heck of a security blanket. Not that I don't think that the quarterbacks are going to be willing to throw it down the field, because I do. But when in doubt, when you're in trouble and number 9 is right there, that is not a bad security blanket to go to, for sure.
The last player, real quick, Vince, sorry, I'm going to throw you a curveball. I'm going to audible here.
I love it.
The last player that I forgot to actually put in this breakdown, and you actually mentioned him earlier as a dark horse, is Charles Jagasaw. Now, there's a lot of reasons why he initially didn't come to mind, and right now it's because he's not taking any reps because he's working his way back from a broken arm. But it sounds like he's going to be back at some point this season. And he has all of the other traits that you mentioned, name recognition, the opportunity for big highlight reel Quentin Nelson plays. He has the measurables. I mean, he's 6'7", 330 pounds, and is getting ready to play guard. So if he's able to come back and perform at the level that we were hoping to see him do all fall camp, and then against Miami, and then against Texas A&M, if he strings together that level of dominant performances like we saw, it's a very small sample size of what we've seen from Charles Jagasaw at right guard. We saw it for 1/2 against Penn State. And arguably his most impressive play of the game, he went the complete wrong direction on a counter. But he deleted the backside defender on the counter, even though he went the wrong way. If he's able to, again, get his feet under him from a football IQ standpoint and turn those type of plays into assignment correct football, but he's still making those highlight reel plays for an offensive lineman, it also wouldn't surprise me if he started working his way up the list too once he returns.
When, in your opinion, or how much game time does he need in order to be in the conversation for this? Because obviously he's going to miss the first few games at least. We don't have a timetable for when he's going to be back. The postseason is important, I would say, in this conversation as well. You know, how many games in the regular season does he need to have in order to, put enough film together for people to be watching?
I mean, ideally, if he's able to find some way to return to the starting lineup by the time they're on the road against Arkansas, I know that's going to be a pretty hefty challenge considering he broke his arm in July, and that would put him back, the last week of September?
Okay.
I think they play September 27th. They play Arkansas, if I remember that correctly.
I'm looking right now. Arkansas is the 27th. Yeah.
Boom. Yep. Okay. There we go.
Because they don't need him for Purdue. I think we can all take probably a breath and not have to worry about Purdue. Obviously, he would miss the A&M and the Miami game, but that's only 3 games missed, and that means he would be back to go on the road at Arkansas. That would be impressive.
If he's able to make it back for that, then potentially. But I will say, if he's able to make it back for the October 18th game against USC, that's going to draw a lot of national attention. Yep. Potentially the last regular season game in a historic rivalry.
Boo! Boo! Don't even say it. Boo!
Potentially, we know the stakes of that game on October 18th.
Yes, we do.
It's going to be a night game. Big headline, starting right guard who is projected to be a starting right guard makes his way back into the starting lineup. If he's able to return for that game, put on a show, and then just be the consistent player that we hope that he is, and then you carry that into the postseason, I think that puts him in a good spot to get All-American recognition. But anything past that, you kind of look at some of their marquee games, and it's like, maybe if Pitt's good, down the stretch, maybe if Boston College on the road is a little bit something, but I would say USC would be my answer to that. It's kind of like the point of, I don't want to call it like the point of no return, but for All-American, for this conversation,
right?
I would call it the point of no return.
I mean, yeah, for team success, him coming back, later than USC, they're still going to be fine. Obviously, he played in the postseason, this past year. But I would also say for the All-American list for this conversation, no, any later than the middle of October, and people, they don't forget about you, but the resume just isn't long enough for season awards. It's just not, right? But yeah, I personally will take him back whenever he's ready, because I do think Notre Dame has an opportunity to make another run this year, and you want your best guys out there. And right now, on August 7th, we think Charles Jagasaw is one of the best 5, and you want him back as soon as possible. And so seeing him out there coaching guys up, being at practice and all of those things, those are all great signs. We'll see how long it takes him to get back up to speed. Man, it would be great if it was Arkansas, though, wouldn't it? I mean, just missing 3 games and then coming back for Arkansas and Boise and, that kind of little mini run right there. I wouldn't be upset about that either. No. That'd be great.
No, it wouldn't hurt. The Arkansas is a defensive tackle that's like 6'5", 350 pounds. That would be a front row matchup to watch. Yeah.
Small. Got it.
Not big.
Okay. All right. So our final segment in our offensive side of the All-America show here is to actually predict who we think are going to be All-Americans. And we've talked about, I believe, all of these guys at one point or another. And so we're not going to necessarily dive into, a bunch of specifics, but we are going to say why we think they are going to end up being All-Americans. And so I'll toss you the softball to start off with. Who is your first All-American prediction?
Jeremiah Love, thank you for tuning into the Irish Breakdown podcast. Be sure to hit that like button on your way out. Yeah, it's prediction. First off, I think Jeremiah Love is going to be an All-American, and I'll go as far to predict. I think he's going to be a first team All-American. I really do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We kind of talked about that when we were talking about him in the first part of the, in the, the elite category. He's elite. He will have elite numbers. He is already considered one of the best, if not the best running back in college football. And if he just continues to do what he's doing, he will be a first-team All-American. And there are very few things in this world that I will take to the bank, and that is definitely one of them. Yeah. I feel very good about Jeremiah Love being a first-team All-American. The next guy on this list, we are moving to the offensive line. Trev, who you got?
Emil Wagner, second-team All-American. I think he's really set up for a good year. I think that he's going to be somebody that's going to draw a lot of attention. And again, I think just naturally offensive tackles are going to gain a little bit more recognition than what offensive guards are, interior offensive linemen. So, and again, when we do these predictions, it's what we think. Now we went through our candidates of who we think it is on the team, but this is who we think the media is going to elect as All-Americans. So whether we agree or disagree, this is where it's at. I think Emil Wagner is a second-team All-American.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Again, he's got the name recognition coming out of the preseason. He started all 16 games. He is one of the better known guys on this offensive line because he started 16 games, and one of the better known guys on an offensive line that is potentially elite. So he's going to get that love moving forward. And I don't disagree with you at all. I think from a name recognition standpoint, from a wins and losses standpoint for Notre Dame, I think Wagner has a great opportunity to win this award. The next one on the list is a guy that we actually talked about fairly recently. And I think a lot of this has to do with the competition, but also with the fact that we feel he's going to be a breakout type guy.
Yeah, I have Eli Raridan also as an All-American. If there's one thing that people love writing about, it's big storylines. And what more to write about than a tight end at Notre Dame on a team that's making another playoff run that goes from 11 catches for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns to a season where he could have 40 receptions, 500 yards, and 6 touchdowns. And those are the breakouts that you like to write home about. I think compared to some of the other stat lines and the other tight ends that are kind of in contention for being an All-American, I think Eli Raridan, with a good season, could be right up there at the top with him. I think he's also going to benefit. Other tight ends, not just Eli Raridan, are going to benefit from not having a Tyler Warren type player as of right now in contention for those spots. Yeah. I think the Vanderbilt's kid's name is Eli Stowers.
Ooh, Eli. All right.
I think so.
Stovers? Yeah. Stovers, I think.
Yeah.
Because he's the kid that transferred in from New Mexico with Pavia.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's also number 9, by the way. So there you go.
So there we go. I mean, he's somebody that's going to be in contention for that. Max Clare at Ohio State will be the tight end at, I think Matt Lauder at Boise State will probably be there. And then a tight end from NC State will probably be up there as well. And his name is escaping me, and it's bothering me that I don't know it. But I think the tight end at NC State will also be in that conversation as well.
There you go. One more guy, and I know this is going to surprise no one, and it's a guy that I added to the list because I do feel like with an injury-free season, with an opportunity to play between two dynamic guards, the opportunity to play on an elite offensive line, and the opportunity to play a unique position like center, I think Ashton Craig has an opportunity to be an All-American, and I think with the name recognition of Notre Dame, I do think that there will be 2 All-Americans on this Notre Dame offensive line because I think they are that good. And if they have an opportunity to be a finalist for the Joe Moore Award, there's going to be some individual awards as well. It's that whole, with team success comes individual success. I think there's going to be 2 offensive linemen. I think one could potentially be first team, one could be second team. Maybe they're both on the second team, whatever the case may be. But I think Ashton Craig has an opportunity to be an All-American here. And that's why I added him to the list. This is, there's definitely some heart there for me. But at the same time, I'm excited for what Ashton Craig is going to be able to show everybody this year. So that's why I added him to the list at the bottom. Now, there's one more thing that we wanted to talk about because I know there's going to be some people that are curious as to why Malachi Fields is not on this list, why Jaden Greathouse is not on this list. Again, it's what we think the media will end up doing, not what, if we're picking an All-America list, maybe we think about having those guys on there, but the wide receiving position, Trev, is absolutely stacked across the country.
It's a very, very deep year for wide receivers in college football. And if I'm correct, we're doing just first and second team All-Americans. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that somebody can make a third team All-American, or, we got Phil Steele, I think, does 4 All-American teams. So, but we're just sticking with first and second. So that's 6 wide receivers.
Right.
When you start thinking about all of the wide receivers across the country, between Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Cam Coleman, Ryan Williams, Bryant Wesco, Antonio Williams, TJ Moore, I mean, just off the top of my head, those are Jordan Tyson at Arizona State. I mean, those are guys that's going to be in steep competition that already have the name recognition and a lot of the production that a lot of these voters will be looking to see for All-American selections. Now, I would love nothing more than to be wrong about this. If Malachi Fields or Jaden Greathouse ends up being an All-American, I hope somebody goes back and brings up this episode on August 7th, and they're like, hey, Trev wasn't that confident that a Notre Dame wide receiver is going to be an All-American, and they are. I would love nothing more than to be wrong. But just looking big picture at this season and how deep a wide receiving room is across the country for how talented they could be for All-American years, then I think it's going to be tough for a Notre Dame wide receiver to crack that. And yes, I know Malachi Fields has had production before in the past, but you go and you look at, he's never had an 1,000-yard receiving season. He hasn't had over 5 touchdowns in his career. And that's stuff that Jeremiah Smith already surpassed as a true freshman. It's one of those where if he stays healthy for an entire season, he's going to be a first-team All-American. How Ohio State fans, and Archer, I don't know if you're in the chat, but how Ohio State fans are talking about Jeremiah Smith and his accolades is very similar to how we're talking about Jeremiah Love. Just give him a first-team All-American if he does what he does. And so that's where I'm at with the wide receiver position. But again, I would love nothing more than to be wrong.
And I will bring up one more guy that we didn't really talk about just to throw him in here at the end because why not? I think Jadarian Price has the talent level to be an All-American. The problem is he's behind Jeremiah Love. Mm-hmm. And I just don't think that they will put 2 running backs from the same team on All-America lists. Now, if God forbid something happens to Jeremiah Love, then Jadarian Price jumps into the catbird seat and is an All-American. Like that, I absolutely believe that could be something that happens. But he's 1B. Again, there's a 1, but he's 1B. And I just don't think that they'll put just at the running back position in general, which is also a fairly deep position across college football. I just don't think that they would put him on a list as well. He's got the talent to do it. There's no doubt about it. If he was running for virtually any other team in the country, I think Jadarian Price has a great opportunity to be an All-American. I just don't think it'll happen at Notre Dame.
I mean, you're not far off there, but yeah, I mean, that's totally fair, but I don't think you're too far off with that. I mean, I've seen Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton both on preseason All-American lists. So it could happen, but I think they're both going to have to put up some gaudy numbers, something that they're obviously both well capable of doing.
Sure.
So that wouldn't surprise me either. Let me ask you this before we switch over to defense. Do you think what's more likely, a Notre Dame wide receiver ends up on a first or second team All-American list, or both Notre Dame running backs end up on All-American lists?
And we're only doing second team, right? So that's
first or second team.
That's 4 running backs total.
Yeah.
Because I also think, to your point, I think the Penn State duo has more name recognition than the Notre Dame duo does. And we've seen that as we look through preseason things, then lists that people have put out and all of those different things. If there's going to be 2 running backs, it's going to be the Penn State duo. Maybe deservedly so, maybe not. Look, they're really, really good. And again, I still think Notre Dame's room is better. But again, we're splitting hairs here. They're both really, really good. I don't think you're going to see a first and second team All-American with 2 Penn State guys and 2 Notre Dame guys and then be done. So I would say more of a chance of a wide receiver sneaking in there in the top 6. That's a possibility as opposed to that. Now, Phil Steele, who has 4 All-America teams, I think there's a shot. You know what I mean? I think there's definitely a shot, but not on 2 teams. Are you in the same boat?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. It stinks. It stinks. I think Jadarian Price is so overlooked. I mean, he's got a hell of a career ahead of him at the next level, obviously. It's unfortunate for him that he's behind Jeremiah Love. It is fortunate for Irish fans that they are both in the same running back room.
Oh, yeah. What's extremely promising, though, is the level and depth of All-American talent that's on this team. It's a good place to be.
Yeah. No doubt about that. So that's going to do it for our look at the offensive side of the football for the potential All-America season in 2025. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And of course, jump on the premium message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All kinds of good stuff over there. And we will keep you updated on everything concerning Notre Dame football, including injuries. But you got to be a member of the premium message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Trev, let's jump into the defensive side of the football. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on the Irish Breakdown podcast presented by FanDuel. And we just got done talking offense. We are going to switch it to the other side of the football, and we are going to talk defense. And Trev, I want to make sure that we put our caveat out there about, how we come up with these lists and what this looks like and all of that. We get a lot of questions between mailbags and buy-sell holds and all of that about potential All-Americans. And we figure we're just going to put it all into one show and kind of give our predictions and what we think about the talent level at Notre Dame. And if they have an All-America talent, if they don't have All-America talent, hint, they do. And we're going to talk about that. And we are just talking about potential for a first or second team All-American. We are not going into third and fourth and honorable mentions and all of those kinds of things. We're just kind of keep it to the first and second team. So that does cut out some possibilities for some other guys from making these lists and things of that nature. So we're just doing first and second team. And what we do is we sort them into 3 categories, Trev. We got top tier. So the guys that are obvious, they're getting all the preseason love, that kind of a deal. And then the second tier would be breakout players that have the opportunity to kind of turn some heads. And then the dark horse category, guys that we think can do all of those things as well. So, and at the end of the day, we're going to predict who the All-Americans are. And again, that is who we think the media is actually going to select for an All-America team, not who we think should be on an All-America team. Those could be different answers. Just putting that out there, but who we think will actually get selected. So, Trev, without further ado, are you ready to jump into the defense?
Always.
All right.
Always am.
All right, my man. So here we go. Top tier candidates. Once again, just like on the offensive side of the ball, we're throwing you a softball with Leonard Moore.
Yes, he is the defensive side of the ball equivalent of what Jeremiah Love is to the offense. We're talking about a player who's, again, racking up the preseason accolades as we get closer and closer to kickoff. Leonard Moore, he was a Walter Camp preseason first-team All-American. He was a Phil Steele for preseason first-team All-American. He's on the Jim Thorpe Award watch list. He was the 2024 FWAA Defensive Freshman of the Year. He was also on the FWAA Freshman All-American team. PFF graded him as the #1 returning cornerback in college football. He is one of only 3 true sophomore defensive backs to earn that honor from PFF since the origin of that list, going back to 2020. He joins Derek Stingley Jr., Caleb Downs, and now it is Leonard Moore. That is pretty good company to be in, I would say, if you're Leonard Moore. But you guys know the story. Don't want to harp too much on it. Comes into the starting lineup midway through the regular season, and then he really turns it around. He turns it into high gear, and he puts people in a spot where, I'm not going to say Benjamin Morrison wasn't missed, but I think it put a lot of minds at ease knowing that Benjamin Morrison was not returning for the 2024 season. I think that's fair to say. He turns around. He has an elite year. He leads the team with 11 passes defended. He gets 2 interceptions on the year. So he's somebody that is poised for a really, really big season. But then again, it begs the question. It's not just something that they're going to walk over and hand over a first-team All-American selection to Leonard Moore. So when you look at it, it begs the question, what does he have to do to be considered an All-American at the end of the year? And there's a lot of people that chalk it up to, he's Leonard Moore. He's fine. He'll be, but there are things that he has to improve on. And Vince, I think it starts with proving that you're not just elite for a freshman, but you were just an elite cornerback in college football. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, he was amazing as a true freshman and thrown into the fire for a guy that we would have had on this list in this exact spot last year in Benjamin Morrison. I mean, he would have been the elite guy that we all assumed is going to be an All-American in his final year at Notre Dame and then head off to the NFL and be elite there. And now we're talking about Leonard Moore in that exact same spot, which is mind-blowing. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing to me that is the case, but that it is the case. And he just needs to continue his development, just continue to be that guy, continue to be that dude. He filled out, I think, a little bit physically from last year to this year already. He's thicker. He's a little bit taller, I think. I don't care what it says on the roster. I feel like he's taller when I see him running around. He just needs to continue. Just right here. Just continue to develop. And with Mike Mickens as his head coach, I don't see that being a problem. And look, based on the way last year ended up, he's going to be tested, but not as often as the other side. And look, we're gonna talk the other side here in a little while, but Leonard Moore just needs to keep being Leonard Moore, and he needs to just be sticky on defense as he has been in practice when we've seen them going into one-on-ones and how he ended the year last year and all of those things. Just continue being you. Like if I was coaching him, obviously we're coaching up the little things, we're doing all of that, but when we're sitting down and we're having our one-on-one, we're talking, just be you, man. Just go out there and be you. That's all you got to do. Just continue to be you. So he's one of those guys that is just like, yeah, not worried about where he's going to be. He's just going to continue being Leonard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's somebody that all the confidence in the world going into the season. Obviously, a lot of other various media outlets think very highly of Leonard Moore as well. Check name recognition off the box, check productivity off the box. If he has another season like he did last year, he will end up on that list for sure. There is no doubt in my mind.
All right, our next guy on the top tier candidate list is a guy that I feel like there's times where I feel like he gets overlooked nationally, but then he's on the Butkus Award watch list. And so maybe he's not overlooked nationally. And that's Drake Bowen at middle linebacker.
Yeah, he is somebody that really surprised me last year, not to the degree of his performance on the field. I mean, if you'd been following him going back to his high school recruiting days, you knew that Drake Bowen was going to come to Notre Dame and be a stud. Where I was really happy to see his development was as a leader of the defense. I mean, we talk about it so many times on this show, Vince. Drake Bowen's evolution from where he was at in the season opener against Texas A&M looked a little lost at times. He was, Jack Kaiser was kind of helping him get lined up. And then you fast forward to USC, where USC audibles at the line. Drake Bowen waits to see what the call is. He's physically moving people to get into the right spots. And then he's the one that comes and makes the play on 3rd and 3. That is the evolution of what Drake Bowen did in year 1 as a starter. as a true sophomore. So now we're talking about somebody who's going into his true junior year. He is on the Buckus Award watch list, like you mentioned. He is on the Phil Steele preseason 4th team All-American. So shout out to Phil Steele for going 4 All-American teams deep. And PFF has him as the number 9 returning linebacker in college football. And that's not, I don't believe that's middle linebacker or outside linebacker. I think that's just linebacker in the country. So he is gaining some national attention, but he is somebody that has stepped up as a vocal leader. Again, same conversation that we had with Emil Wagner. Would not surprise me if there's a C on Drake Bowen's chest on August 31st when we see them open up down in Hard Rock. So he is somebody that I believe is going to take an even further step this year. But All-American, when we start talking about that on the defensive side of the ball, it gets a little bit more tricky because there's so much rotating and there's so much, fluctuation between who plays what rep, who plays what snap. I do believe that Drake Bowen is going to see the share of linebacker reps at this year on defense for them. And some of it's just going to come down to what his raw numbers look like at the end of the year. And that's something that you and I both believe is going to have an uptick compared from last season.
Yeah, I think that Drake Bowen, is probably, as I was sitting there listening to you talk and kind of reflecting on what I was saying about him being overlooked, I almost feel like he's overlooked by Notre Dame fans to a degree because of KVA and because of Osbury and because of Snead. Like, there's a ton of talent in the linebacker room, right? And I feel like Drake is the guy who just comes in, does his job. He does it at a high level, and he's kind of forgotten about because he's maybe he's not as flashy to some Notre Dame fans as some of these other guys and kind of what they're doing. He's really freaking good, Trev. Like, he's not going to come off the field very often. And if you're going to put your 2 best linebackers on the field at once, it's KVA and Drake Bowen. Like, those are the 2 guys that are going to be roaming the middle of the field. We don't know what that transition is going to look, or the rotation is going to look like. It's one of the things we're going to be watching. I just think that you're going to be hard pressed to take Drake Bowen off the field for an extended period of time. He's going to be on the field. He is maturing into a leader on the field, with Kaiser being off to the NFL and doing what he's doing. Thank you, dear. And I just feel like Drake Bowen is poised to be quite the breakout player and quite the guy that, I think we see it. And I think a lot of Notre Dame fans see it, but I think there's also a lot of Notre Dame fans that don't see it or don't want to see it. And they see, oh, it's just another Jack Kaiser, or it's just another Drew White or whatever. Like, Drake Bowen's a stinking athlete, man. Like, there's a reason he was here on a baseball scholarship as well. The kid's an athlete. And now he's given up baseball to focus on football. So look out. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about Drake Bowen. And I think he has every opportunity to be on this list for a defense that I think is also going to be very, very, very good. No doubt.
Yeah, his athletic ability gets overlooked a lot by Notre Dame fans, which is something that I still just can't fathom. He's a very rangy linebacker.
Yes.
Combined with the fact that he is also fundamentally sound and that he's assignment correct most of the time. Where I think he makes the jump from just kind of impact player to All-American type of player is if he gets one little bit more uptick in the tackle numbers. He finished 3rd on the team last year in total tackles. He had 78. He had 3 forced fumbles last year. But if one of his pressure numbers or his interception numbers, like pass defense numbers, get an uptick, I think that he's going to put himself right in the mix of being in the All-American conversation for linebackers. And I'm not talking about he doesn't have to have a Manti Te'o season where he has 7 interceptions. Not going to be mad if that happens. But if he gets 1 or 2 interceptions, upticks the sack numbers a little bit, because he is going against some steep linebacker competition. I think of some of the linebacking core at Pitt. Pitt's like tackle for loss leader and interception leader from last season and passes defended leader from last season were all linebackers. I mean, those are some gaudy numbers. You combine that with some of the linebackers that, Texas brings back with Anthony Hill. You combine that with some of the other numbers of like the LSU linebackers that return. It's going to be some steep competition, but if he has the season that we think that he's capable of having, he's going to be right in the mix for sure.
All right. Well, the next guy that we are going to talk about in the top tier candidate list is another guy that is taking a big step up from a leadership standpoint because his running mate is now off to the NFL and was the leader of the back end of the defense. But this guy came on, I'm not going to say out of nowhere, but he was a revelation last year and wasn't just Robin to Xavier Watts' Batman. I mean, he was excellent in his own right and ended up getting an interception in his first game as a starter. And that's a Don Schuler.
Couldn't agree more. I think he was more, I guess, in terms of the Justice League, if we're going to stick with some superhero analogies here, he was more Batman to Xavier Watts' Superman than he was Robin to Xavier Watts' Batman.
There we go. I like that.
You know, like he's somebody he was more of a 1B than a 2 when I look at Adon. And if you just look at his raw numbers and his performance from last season, I think his overall breakout was kind of overshadowed by the fact that Xavier Watts was just the guy on defense. Mm-hmm. But you take Xavier Watts off of that defense, just from a stats perspective, we're talking about a safety that had 59 tackles, 5 passes defended, 3 interceptions, a pick 6, and a forced fumble against Georgia that I'm sure Trevor Etienne still thinks about once a week. I mean, that was a bone-crushing hit in the red zone, changed the momentum of that game. Adon Schuler steps into this year as another, he started all 16 games for Notre Dame's defense last year. He has that full season under his belt of experience. And we've talked about his maturation process that's got him to this point. And it's almost ideal when you start thinking about the development of players. In 2023, as a true freshman, he sat behind Xavier Watts, kind of watched him work and watched him prepare. And then in 2024, he got to be alongside of him on the field for all 16 games as a starter, learned from him, learned how he attacked different offenses, learned how he prepared on the field and how to read certain things. And now this year, we get the opportunity to see what Adon Schuler did or is going to do without Xavier Watts. And so that's kind of the ideal progression you like to see from players. But we're talking about somebody who hasn't racked up a lot of preseason accolades. He was on Fox Sports breakout candidate list for 2025. But again, productive first year. But when you talk about Adon Schuler making an All-American list, there are some things that he will have to tighten up. And the expectation is not, just beat Xavier Watts. And that'd be too easy. I don't know if anybody can go beat Xavier Watts, but in Adon Schuler's own right, there's some things that he's going to have to clean up, and it starts with cleaning up the missed tackles. He flies downhill. He's a great alley safety. He's probably going to be Notre Dame's boundary safety. Not probably. He will be Notre Dame's boundary safety again this upcoming season. But the missed tackles from him is something that will have to get cleaned up this year, Vince. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I mean, and he was just out there being an athlete, you know what I mean? And just coming downhill, just screaming downhill, looking to just, take somebody's head off, essentially. And, you can do that when you've got Xavier Watts behind you, man in the middle. And he had an opportunity to make some plays behind the line of scrimmage that he missed on some, and so you're right. That's one of the things that that he can work on, obviously. And as a second-year starter, that's what you do. He came in not expecting to have to be the man, and he did not have to be the man, and still did a really, really good job in his spot. And like I said, was a revelation at that spot. And now he takes over a whole new role. And we've seen in the limited amount of time that we've been in practice, we've seen Adon be the leader of that back end of the defense. You still have Leonard Moore back there and Christian Gray back there, and whoever is going to be the safety opposite of Don when it's all said and done. And he's telling guys where to go, what to do, where to be, and, getting on guys if they're not in the right spot. So he is taking on that leadership role just how you would want him to, with Xavier Watts not being on the team anymore. And so it's fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the biggest concerns about Xavier Watts no longer being in the lineup is who steps in for that big moment. Vince, we've talked so many times. It felt like every post-game show. You and I were sitting back talking about Xavier Watts came in again and just, changed the momentum of the game. And there's been some question about who's going to be able to do that on the back end this year. And I think Adon Schuler has already shown a little bit of that. He had their first interception of the season last year against Texas A&M. He had a pick 6 against Georgia Tech when the offense was kind of struggling to officially put the game away. It was they were going for fake punts and they missed a field goal, and offense was struggling to put the game away. Adon Schuler runs back a pick 6, and it's like, okay, it's over. It's done. Has that big force fumble against Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. And he also had the first interception of fall camp in that 7-on-7 period. And so it's just all of this is kind of a recipe for success to me. And not so much a breakout season, but he's going to elevate from being an impact player to that All-American level player that we believe that he's going to be.
All right, so let's drop down a tier and talk about potential breakout candidates, at least nationally. And I think this first one makes so much sense because it's summertime. I rewatched a bunch of games so far this year, as I'm sure you have as well. And I rewatched that USC game and with the commentary on, which I don't usually listen to during a game, but whatever. I listened to it with the commentary, and holy crap, were they dogging on Christian Gray the entire time, And look, he made some mistakes. He also had some really good plays in that game. And they acted like, they brought somebody down out of the stands and put him in a uniform, and somehow he got an interception and went 100 yards, to seal the deal. Christian Gray is looked at in just a myriad of ways nationally and a myriad of ways from Notre Dame fans as well. And so he has an opportunity to do some great things because he is going to get picked on this year because you've got Leonard Moore on the other side, as we were alluding to earlier when we were talking about the top tier players. And so, man, I'll tell you what, Christian Gray has an opportunity to get some people talking about him in all the right ways.
Christian Gray has the opportunity to put up some pretty nice numbers when the season is said and done. Argument can be made he should have had that last season with the amount of interceptions that he ended up dropping. He caught the difficult ones.
Yeah, I know, right?
Caught the difficult ones, but Christian Gray is somebody that has become a very polarizing player for some Notre Dame fans, which I thought was interesting. In the spring, there was talk about, is somebody going to be able to come up and take his spot? And, with this incoming freshman class coming in, are they going to battle Christian Gray? And in short, no. Christian Gray is one of the best cornerbacks on this team. And I think his season would have been looked at in a little bit more of a higher light if Leonard Moore didn't have the breakout season that he did. Now, I'm happy that Leonard Moore did have that breakout, but the key to Christian Gray this year becoming an All-American is just playing at a more consistent level. After he was injured, we saw some of the technical issues become an issue for him. The grabbing, the holding, being out of position. I wonder if, Christian Gray was not a strong off-man cover corner. So I wonder if some of the issues with his hand kind of led Mike Mickens and Al Golden to put him in more off-man situations where maybe that might not be as big of an issue. I could be looking too deep into that, but I thought that was interesting because that was clearly not a strong suit of his for being a true sophomore first-time starter in the secondary. We're still talking about somebody who's still a true junior, and the best football is still well in front of Christian Gray. And I feel bad for anybody that's written off this kid because I think that he's about to have a monster of a season. I really do. But for Christian Gray, Vince, it just comes down to consistency. Mm-hmm. If he can be a more consistent player but maintain the big playmaking ability that he had that we saw down the stretch of the year, and honestly consistently throughout the entire year, Christian Gray is going to be an All-American this year.
Right. I don't disagree with you. I'm a big Christian Gray fan, and I think he's got the talent level to really surprise some people, which is crazy to talk about because I remember having the conversation with Brian when, you had Benjamin Morrison on one side, you had Christian Gray on the other. One was 20 and one was 29. And when you're on the 9th floor of the press box at Notre Dame, because they look so similar physically, you couldn't tell them apart. You know what I mean? And they both played at a very high level. They play very similar to each other. Well, Christian Gray did us a favor, and now he's number 6. So we don't have to worry about that anymore. But he has the ability. He has all the intangibles to be really good. And, to his credit, with all the negativity that was swirling around him at times last year, the kid just bounced back every single time. I mean, take a look at the USC game, right? Started out on fire, had some issues in the middle of the game, then ends up sealing the game with a pick 6. Look at the Penn State game, and what he was able to do, essentially winning the game for them by getting the ball back and allowing the offense to go kick a field goal to win the Orange Bowl. So, I mean, Christian Gray, to your point, just needs to maintain some of that big playability and just be more consistent. If he can do that, I think mentally he'll be just fine. Just needs to have that consistency, and I think he's going to get a lot of people's attention throughout the year. The next two guys, and we can kind of talk about these guys at the same time, obviously individually, but at the same time, as far as breakout players or candidates are concerned here. And we're going to go with two guys that you and I, when we were at practice the other day, saw them lining up at the same time with the second unit. And we both looked at each other like, okay, this is the ceiling unit because these guys are absolute freaks. And I'm referring to Bryce Young and I'm referring to Boubacar Traore and what they bring to the table. Holy cow, Trev. I'm just gonna give you the floor and just let you go on Bryce and Boubacar.
Yeah, the interesting thing about these two edge rushers, Vince, is they are breakout candidates, but for completely different reasons. For Bryce Young, it's what step do you make from your freshman to sophomore year? What is your development track? I always beg people to go back and look at what Isaiah Foskey's career path was at Notre Dame. Everybody was freaking out that, this highly touted recruit in Isaiah Foskey didn't have the breakout season that he was supposed to have as a true freshman and was only used on special teams to block punts. And we saw a little bit of the same thing with Bryce Young last year. It's like, he's 6'7", he's 265, he's the son of a Hall of Famer. Like, why does he not have 14 and a half sacks yet? And it's like, well, because he's 18 years old and he's still learning how to become a good football player. But what we've seen so far from this offseason, he's filled out, has not lost a step. He's becoming a smarter football player, and he's just a year older. I mean, we're still talking about somebody that when the game wasn't officially sealed, he got a sack against Indiana close to the goal line, and it ended their drive. That's somebody that played that in the playoffs. Bryce Young is somebody that was kind of thrown to the fire a little bit because of all the shifting that they had to do along the defensive line because of the injuries to Jordan Botelho and because of the injuries to Boubacar Traore, who I'm going to talk about here in a second. And so for Bryce Young, it comes down to what kind of jump do you make? The only offseason recognition that he's gotten, he made Feldman's freak list at number 44. But I understand why people aren't talking about him yet. He has the name, check that box off. He has the measurables, check that box off. But then you go back and you look at what he did last year, he had 1.5 sacks. And so for him to generate that, Notre Dame is in need of a crucial impact edge rusher week in and week out. And that's why we wanted to talk about Bryce Young and Boubacar Traore in the same light, because it's almost like a necessity that one of those two, of course, combined with Junior Tuihalamaka and Josh Burnham and Jordan Botelho when he comes back, but those two guys, to Vince's point about being the ceiling group that we saw in practice, one of those two guys has to emerge. You turn the page over to Boubacar Traore. He's a breakout player. Why? He's got to stay healthy. And I know we've tried to avoid that conversation with him, but he was on the verge of being a breakout player for Notre Dame last season, but unfortunately injuries ended his season a little bit short. But we're talking about somebody whose athletic ability is off the charts. Emil Wagner, again, I keep referencing back to his time with the media yesterday, but he talked about Boubacar Traore, and it was, for all intents and purposes, raving reviews about what he was able to bring to the table. I'm getting the quotes pulled up now, but I mean, Emil was asked about Boubacar Traore, and it was the first question that somebody asked him. And he said, quote, "He looks great. I think Boubacar is somebody we said back in his freshman year is somebody who could play in the NFL and be a day one draft pick. He's extremely athletic, has really long arms, good bend, and has a plethora of moves. I think he's somebody who is going to have a good year, and I'm excited to see him back." And then they were asked about his explosiveness. And Vince, I know you can attest to this as well. They asked if that part of his game was back, and he said, "Definitely. I think that and more. He has a quick first step. His pop and his explosion is all back. Whatever he was doing this offseason right after he got hurt has worked. He's put in a lot of work to get himself back to where he needs to be." We got to see him up close and personal.
It worked.
Whatever it was, it worked. And so, but I think that's a testament to how highly his teammates think of him. Unfortunately, he hasn't gained that national recognition because, again, it's just he didn't have that crazy breakout game against Texas A&M when all eyes were on Notre Dame. He had 1 sack in 2023 on 1 play against USC, like the only play he was in the game. And once he started to generate a little bit of momentum, unfortunately, he got hurt. But we saw it up close and personal, Vince. Boubacar's a real deal.
Oh, I mean, he's long, he's athletic, he's fast, he's twitchy. He's everything that you want in a defensive end. It's just, can he stay healthy the whole time? If he can, he's going to be on the lips of national writers. He just is. Same with Bryce Young, right? They do it in a bit of a different way, which is okay. You're going to have to pick your poison when those two are on the field at the same time, And they're running with the second team right now, Trev. So it's like, what's the rotation going to look like? Are they going to, how long are they going to be out there? And then you've got, Burnham, and you got Tui Alamaka, and you've got Botelho, and it's like, okay, there's talent up and down on the edge. And so as long as that group can stay healthy, someone is going to pop. Someone is going to. For the life of me, I don't know who it is. I think it's a good idea to have both of these guys on the breakout list because I think both of them have the opportunity to do that. Somebody's going to pop at the end position for Notre Dame. On the right, the left, I don't care. It doesn't matter. It could be more than one guy, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about our predictions for All-American. But both of these guys have an absolute opportunity to be breakout guys, both of them.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more.
All right, let's move to our dark horse candidates, and we're back to the defensive line for a guy that I feel like has to be on his 6th or 7th year at Notre Dame because I feel like we talk about him all the time, and we haven't really seen the production yet during the season, but this is the opportunity for Jason Onye to have that big season and to really turn some heads.
The ingredients are there, Vince. I mean, you want to start checking off some things off the list. He's 6'5", he's 302 pounds. You get the measurables taken care of. He's a very physically gifted. Argument could be made he's probably one of their most physically gifted interior defensive linemen in terms of skill set, the potential to be a well-rounded player. He has the opportunity at his size to be a really dominant force in the run game. But he's also one of the players that could help replace in a big way what was lost with Riley Mills from a pass rushing standpoint. Riley Mills last year led the team with 34 total pressures, led the team. And he didn't play against Georgia, Penn State, and Ohio State. So those numbers could have been creeping up close to 40 if he was able to stay healthy for the remainder of the season. You got to do a little bit more digging with Jason Onye, but he was an effective pass rusher. He's a very efficient player. Last season, he had 10 total pressures and 4 hits plus sacks on the quarterback in 2024. Big picture, those numbers aren't going to turn a lot of heads, but he did that in 54 pass rushing snaps. You average that out over the course of the season, you start talking about some real gaudy-looking numbers for Jason Onye. I know the philosophy around you don't replace Riley Mills with one guy. You have to try to replace the production, not the name on the back of the jersey. But Jason Onye has the opportunity in front of him, if he's able to remain with the team and stay healthy all year, to resemble some of those numbers. I'm not banking on Jason Onye being Riley Mills. They're two different styles of player. But what Jason Onye brings to the table is an all-American tool belt. You know what I mean? Like, he's somebody that he's long, he's athletic, he's twitchy, he put on good weight. Because I got a little nervous when I saw out of the spring, Jason Onye went from 292 to like 308. And I was like, okay, that's going to be interesting to see what he looks like. We get to spring practice, he looked good. Over summer, he looked good. Now in fall camp, he's still moving great. He's a little bit stronger, but he hasn't lost that twitch. Jason Onye is somebody to keep an eye out on. But the reason why he is a dark horse candidate is because of his lack of time around the team, and we just got to see it.
Yep, absolutely. Our next guy defensively in the dark horse candidate is a dark horse candidate for all the different, almost opposite reasons as Jason Onye, to be honest with you. And maybe people are surprised that we haven't brought him up yet. And for me, it's because we just don't know what the rotation is going to be. But what I do know is when Kingston Viliamoasa is on the field, good things happen.
Yeah. And I think a good argument could be made that he would have been a true freshman All-American last year if he didn't get hurt against Army. Made him miss the Army game. It made him miss the USC game. And I believe it made him miss the IU game, if I'm remembering correctly.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's
And then
accurate.
I think he played like 10 to 15 snaps against Georgia and then was kind of back in the rotation for Penn State and Ohio State. But Kingston, I do believe, has the most diverse skill set in the linebacker room. He can drop back into coverage. He can run with tight ends. He can make plays in the box. And he's also a lethal pass rusher like we saw against Louisville. Like a good natural pass rusher. There's some things that he has in his tool belt that somebody like Jalen Sneed, who has been used more as a niche edge rusher on third down, just doesn't have naturally. He has a little bit more bend to him. He's able to dip the shoulder a little bit more. And so Kingston is somebody that is a dark horse because we don't know what that rotation is going to be. Let's call a spade here. A lot of All-American, a lot of defensive players that make All-American lists, it's kind of a numbers game. You go back and you look historically, it's like, yeah, well, this linebacker had 124 tackles this season. It's like, yeah, and the team went 6-6. But that player specifically had a good year. I don't know if Kingston Viliamas is going to be a triple-digit tackler this year.
Right.
So where he's going to have to make up for that is in the supplementary areas of like a stat sheet. What kind of tackles for loss are you getting? What kind of sack numbers are you getting? Are you able? He was the only linebacker last season with an interception, which is crazy to think about. But what kind of interception numbers are you bringing to the table? Are you just an impact player in all three phases of defense? I think that's a big key for Kingston.
Kaiser should have had an interception, but that's a different conversation for a different time. The one that got called back, ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, look, you don't have to explain to me how talented Kingston is, how much he can impact a football game, wherever he is on the field, whether he's rushing the passer, whether he's in the box, whether he's defending the pass, whatever the case may be. You don't have to convince me. The kid was born to be a linebacker, and he's going to be on the field a bunch. Will he be on the field a bunch to accumulate the numbers that he needs to be an All-American? That's why he's a dark horse. And I think that everybody that follows Notre Dame knows who Kingston is. Everybody. I don't know that would be the case nationally. And again, we don't get to vote on All-America teams, right? So he would be on my list. He would be in the neighborhood of on my list, depending on how things go, this season. But he's definitely somebody who's on like Vince's watch list. You know what I mean? Because I think he's going to be dynamic when he's on the field. And I just think it's a scary proposition for offenses that are on Notre Dame's schedule when Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliamas are on the field at the same time. I mean, I just don't know how you could get better at the linebacker position than having those two guys out there.
And that's a testament to how deep this linebacker room is, Vince. I mean, we're sitting down questioning how many snaps Kingston Viliamas is going to get this year.
Right.
In years past, it's, Kingston Viliamas is on the roster. Okay, then he's going to start. And it's just a testament to the depth. Truly is. But I agree with you. It's gonna be interesting to see what that linebacker rotation works itself out to be, because that is one of the things, at least in my opinion, from what I've seen in fall camp, that's kind of one of the position battles that hasn't really sorted itself out yet. To me, sure. I think that just speaks to the level of play between Kingston, Jalen Sneed, and Jaden Osbury is so high that they're just going to kind of stick with the rotation that they had.
Yeah, because right now when we see the first team run out there, and obviously it's not very often, but when we've seen them run out there, it's Jalen Sneed and Drake Bowen as the starters, and then KVA is out there at Mike with the second team, and I believe Osbury was out there with him with the second team, I believe, if I'm being accurate. But look, I don't care. First team, second team, they're going to rotate. It's going to be fun to watch. They're going to be talented no matter who's out there.
Oh yeah, there was one drill that I saw, and it was Kingston. It was Kingston and Madden lined up next to each other.
Oh, come on now,
bro, that was nuts. The future of the Notre Dame linebacking room is looking very bright.
Yes, yeah. There's not going to be much of a drop off, no matter who is in this room. Because you figure Jalen, I believe, is probably done after this year. Not sure what Osbury's going to do. Not sure what Drake is going to do, but he's going to only be junior this year. So he has his senior year left. The linebacker position's in great shape for the foreseeable future, for sure. So, all right. So that's going to do it for that part. Now it's time to predict our All-Americans and who we think will actually be named an All-American. And the interesting part, well, not interesting, but I just want to throw out there again, we are predicting who the media is going to put on their All-America list, not necessarily who we think will be there or who we think should be there, I should say, but who we think will actually get voted onto an All-America team. So, Trev, softball number 2, who's your first team All-American on the defense?
Man, Vince, you're just lobbing these up to me. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you. It's Leonard Moore. Right. I mean, that's the obvious choice, I think, on the defensive side of the ball. All the preseason accolades, he has the measurables, he has the national attention, he has the production to back it up. I think Leonard Moore is going to end the season, again, not just on any All-American list. I'm confident in saying that he's going to be a first-team All-American when the season is said and done.
Okay, I think that's a layup. That's what we like to call a freshman dunk. That's a layup. We're going to slap the backboard and we're going to call it a day. Leonard Moore, first-team All-American, no doubt about it. Who's the second guy that you have on this list? Because we've got 3 total. Who's your number 2?
The second guy on this list is Drake Bowen. You know, when Notre Dame goes and makes a run that we believe that they're going to, one of the main talking points is going to be who's kind of the quarterback of the defense.
No.
And that's going to be Drake Bowen. He's going into his second year as a starter. He's already starting to gain some national traction. Again, he's making some top 10 lists out there across some pretty big named outlets. But I also think that he's going to put up the numbers necessary to be on the All-American list as well. I mean, Jack Kaiser, who was a part of the linebacker rotation last year, finished the season with 90 tackles.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Drake with more experience, because, I mean, we can go back on film and look at all the plays where he might have just been a split second late or rushed into the B gap when really the read was filling the A gap. You know what I mean? So it's stuff like that I think in going into year 2 as a starter, I think that it's going to be – I think it's going to pay major dividends to him. And so I have Drake Bowen as a second-team All-American.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you on that one. I think that he's the quarterback of the defense. I think that he's not going to come off the field very often. That there will be a rotation of some sort. So he's going to come off the field at times, but I just don't think he's going to come off very often. And so he's going to have an opportunity to really put those stats together. The final guy may be a surprise to some people, not to me. I think this is a great pick. And who's your third guy?
Christian Gray. I think Notre Dame is going to end the season with 2 All-Americans at cornerback. And for a host of reasons. One of them, with Leonard Moore being the more household name, I guess you could say, between the two, I don't think that a lot of teams are going to be willingly targeting number 15, especially in man coverage. And so I think Christian Gray is going to reap the benefits of getting targeted quite a bit. Because at the end of the day, you got to throw at one of them. You can't just throw the entire
right.
Exactly.
Right.
The ball's got to go somewhere. And I think Christian Gray is going to capitalize on his opportunities. He's back to being healthy again. He has a year more of experience from all the things that we've heard. It's kind of, I don't want to say taking football more seriously, but more there's more intention to detail as far as the craft of being a good football player, not just relying on, well, I'm a freak athlete, I'm fast, I'm long, I can flip my hips well. There's more intentionality around becoming a really good football player. I think that's going to pay off for him, but I have Notre Dame ending this year with 2 All-American cornerbacks.
I love it. I think that Notre Dame has arguably in the preseason one of the best corner rooms in all of college football, especially at the starters. And the depth is young and talented. And so as long as nothing crazy happens, I think that these 2 are going to be absolutely elite by the end of the season. And look, they're going to get tested. There's no doubt about it. They're going to get tested. Christian Gray more than Leonard Moore. But they've also had an opportunity now to play a bunch of games together. They've had an entire offseason together, and now they're starting another season together. And I think that bodes well for Notre Dame. Look, Leonard Moore was not in the plans to be a starter at Notre Dame last year. I mean, he was behind Benjamin Morrison. You know what I mean? And so that was not the plan going into last year. It ended up being the plan for the rest of the season. And so I think having those guys have that entire time playing together, last year and then an entire offseason and then going into this year and the rest of this year to play together is going to pay dividends. And Christian Gray could be the recipient of those dividends when it comes to stats. No doubt about it. Oh, yeah. I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball, Trevor, because you threw me one, and I think that's only fair. I'm going to throw a freshman All-American your way, and I want you to tell me what you think. Tay Johnson, freshman All-American.
Love it. I do. Well, one, it falls in line with what my bold prediction was when we talked about the safety room. I said Tay Johnson was going to lead the safety room in interceptions this season. Everything that we've seen from him in camp, all the intel that we've heard, you got to get on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian has so much great intel that he gets from his sources around the team and what we see at practice. Got to hop on the premium message boards. But I think Tay Johnson is well in the conversation to be a freshman All-American. Now, reminder that freshman All-Americans also go to redshirt freshmen.
Yep.
But I think he's one of the very few that could. On offense, I know we didn't talk about it with them, but if CJ Carr wins the starting job, if he has a season that we think that he could be in that conversation to be a freshman All-American.
He's a freshman. Yeah, he's a redshirt freshman. Yeah, good point.
Even though we've been talking about him since December of 2023, he is still a redshirt freshman.
I know, right?
You know what I mean? Which is crazy to think about. But Bronte Johnson's in that discussion for me. The only other one that could potentially, and this one's a bit of a reach, would be Jadon Blair at safety. I think he has the next closest path to rotating in. I think the three freshman corners between Mark Zachary, Cree Thomas, and Dallas Golden would need – I think they would need an injury to happen to play enough snaps to be considered for – I think they're going to be impactful players, and I do think they're going to play. It's just I don't think they're going to have the volume necessary to be a freshman All-American unless it's for an injury. But yes, love the Tay Johnson pick for freshman All-American. Love that.
Beautiful. Well, that's how we're going to close out our defensive talk about, the All-America list and our predictions therefore. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and, of course, jump on the premium message boards that Trevor just talked about, and you can see it scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Head on over, boards.irishbreakdown.com. You will not be disappointed. I promise you that. The intel is flowing over there, and any kind of breaking news is also over there. And so you definitely want to check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, the final part of our show today, Trevor, is we are going to jump into our opponent preview for Notre Dame and game number 11, the final game at Notre Dame Stadium in the regular season, is November 22nd at 3:30, and that is against the Syracuse Orange. That's it. Just Orange. Just so used to them being the Orangemen, being in the Big East and playing basketball. Like, that's what I think about when I think of Syracuse. But we're talking football. We're talking the oblong-shaped ball and what Syracuse brings to the table in 2025. Bottom line, Trev, this group is a lot different than they were last year, and there's going to be a lot of change up in Syracuse for sure. And just as a reminder, you are listening to the Irish Breakdown podcast, sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel, and we didn't want to leave that part out. So we're talking Syracuse football here, Trev, and this is going to be an interesting year. Obviously, it's going to be senior day for Notre Dame. When Syracuse comes to town, but man, this is going to be an interesting matchup and an interesting season for Fran Brown in year 2.
Yeah, it really is. And I know that we're going to get a lot of questions about it leading up to the game, but is Notre Dame going to let senior day distract them? And no, Marcus Freeman's 3-0 in senior day, and the games have not been that close. They beat Virginia 35-14 last year. They beat Wake Forest 45-7 in 23, and they beat Boston College 44-0 in 2022. So over the span of 3 games, they've allowed 21 points, and they have scored whatever 99 plus 35 is, because my mental math is not that great right now.
134.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What are you, working a school? Come on, guy. Embarrassing me like that? No. So, but yes, senior day has not been that big of an issue for Notre Dame in recent years. I think the last closest senior day game they had was like back in 2017. But this is going to be a really interesting year. I mean, we all know what Syracuse did last year. Fran Brown goes into year 2. They go 10-3. They lost some key pieces on offense and defense from a year ago. And we're going to get to it later. But the schedule that they have this year, I believe, to be significantly harder than what they had last year as well. You combine that with how much they lost on both sides of the football, we're going to get to see what kind of coach Fran Brown is this year. And I like Fran Brown as a coach. I really do. I like what he's building at Syracuse. It's going to be interesting to see if they can keep it rolling. But last year they burst onto the scene. They had a very high-powered offense. They started out the season 5-1 with a really head-scratching loss to Stanford. That one was odd. They beat Georgia Tech, who was ranked at the time because they were fresh off of beating Florida State and Ireland. They lose to Stanford 26-24. They rout Holy Cross 42-14. They beat a ranked UNLV team in overtime 44-41. They beat NC State on the road 24-17. Unfortunately, they get the doors blown off of them against Pitt on the road 41-13. That was kind of in like the middle of Pittsburgh's hot streak. And then I think a week after that is kind of when the wheels fell off for Pitt. So could be a timing thing. But Syracuse had an interesting year. After their loss to Pitt, they beat Virginia Tech at home in overtime. They lost to Boston College on the road 37-31. And then they finished out their season on a 4-game win streak. So it's a really interesting year coming up for Fran Brown at Syracuse. I will be very interested to see how they replace what they lost.
Yeah, this is it's almost going to be a completely new roster. It is going to be very, very interesting. There's no doubt about that. And look, I think Syracuse has the opportunity to obviously put up big numbers. I don't know if those numbers are going to be in the win column. I think that's going to be the biggest issue, obviously, for Syracuse moving forward, Trev. And I'll let you kind of get in there about the portal and why this team is going to look so much different this year than it did last year, because it is almost going to be unrecognizable if you're a Syracuse fan or if you are an opponent of Syracuse and what that looks like moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, you go through and you look at their roster and what Syracuse did. They had 24 outgoing players in the transfer portal. They had 16 coming in. Of those 16 coming in, I believe 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of them on offense are within the 2 deep, and 5 of them on defense are in the 2 deep. So this is going to be a very new look team. They're also going to be tasked with replacing their top 4 pass catchers from last year. We'll dive more into that.
That's the biggest one for me, but like you said, we'll dive into that one as we go.
We'll dive more into it once we get to the offensive side of the ball. But, the Syracuse team pieced together a good year last year. But, Vince, to your point, it's a completely different looking team. They went 10-3 in Fran Brown's first season, and they won in the postseason. They beat Washington State in the Holiday Bowl in a shootout. I mean, it was like 53-35. It was a high-scoring game. They had really big wins. Their biggest win of the season is they essentially ended Miami's hopes of making the playoffs. They beat them 42-38. They beat Georgia Tech early in the year. They beat UNLV, who played for the Mountain West Championship, 44-41. But again, their losses were just weird. You lose to Stanford 26-24. That was a head-scratching loss. You lose and then your 2 other losses weren't that competitive. And so what is the real Syracuse? Mm-hmm. The biggest question about them, if they're able to keep it rolling, is their roster. The impact of the losses that they had between the draft and the NFL draft and the transfer portal were kind of bigger than like the overall just numbers up top, in my opinion, when you look at the Syracuse roster. But man, you dig into what they lose, and it's just a completely different looking team. Kyle McCord's gone. He led the nation in passing last year. It's going to be interesting to see how they piece it together this year.
Well, speaking of Kyle McCord and the offense, let's dive right into the offense specifically. It is year 2 of offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon, which makes sense because it's also year 2 of Fran Brown. And this is a very, very pass-heavy offense, which is why the aforementioned Kyle McCord was able to put up the numbers that he did, being number 1 in passing yards and number 5 in passing touchdowns last year. I mean, they threw the ball all over the yard, and I would assume they're going to attempt to do that again this year, Trev. And do they have... I mean, we'll get into the quarterbacks in just a second. Do they have the signal caller to do it? But more importantly, do they have the pass catchers to do it?
Yeah, that's going to be the biggest question mark for them. You look at who they lost this past season, and their talent that they had last year at the receiver position helped feed into Kyle McCord being the number 1 quarterback in the country in passing yards. They were the number 1 passing offense in the country in yards per game. They were number 29 in yards per attempt. Syracuse last year in 13 games threw 598 passes in 13 games. That led the country by 36 attempts. And keep in mind, there were teams that played 16 games last year, and they did that in 13.
They threw the ball on an average of 46 times a game.
Yeah, I mean, that's insane.
46 times a game. Now,
I'm sure you're asking, well, were they able to run the football? And to that I say, no, they weren't.
No, they weren't.
But in all seriousness, you go and you look at what Syracuse did last year. They had an 1,000-yard running back, but it was kind of because he was able to put up some numbers against not great opponents. Syracuse last year, they ranked number 126 in rushing yards per game at 97.6. And they were also not an efficient running team either. They were number 25 in rushing offense and yards per carry. They averaged 3.16 yards per carry. So Jeff Nixon is going to have his work cut out for him this year because he's going to have to find a way to establish the run while breaking in a first-time starting quarterback, whether it's Steve Angeli or Ricky Collins. You combine that with some of the offensive line issues that we're going to get ready to talk about. This makes for a really, really interesting year for the Syracuse offense. Yeah. What identity do you want to have? Do you become a more balanced offense? Because you're not going to want a first-time starter getting into a shootout every single week. Ideally, I know that's more of like a defensive question, but offensively, now you just don't have, as of right now, the tools to be able to get into shootouts with teams every single week. So, Vince, let's kind of switch over here to quarterbacks.
Yep.
Notre Dame is not the only team in college football, contrary to what some people believe, to be having an ongoing quarterback battle in the offseason right now. And Syracuse is another one of those teams. As a refresher, Ricky Collins transferred in. He transferred in from LSU. He was in the winter portal. He was with them all spring. And then, of course, I don't know if any of you guys heard about any of the news, but Steve Angeli also transferred to Syracuse from Notre Dame. He left after the spring. He left in the spring portal window. Odds are Angeli didn't go somewhere he didn't think he was going to start. You know what I mean? Like, especially somebody has 2 years of eligibility left. You got stuff like that. So the quarterback battle at Syracuse is going to be an interesting one. I'll say that because I'm not entirely sure who their starter is going to be. And I know a lot of the big headlines for a lot of people in this game is, Steve Angeli makes his return to Notre Dame Stadium. But there's been some things out there.
Yeah, we actually talked to a source here in the last 24 hours or so about the quarterback battle at Syracuse specifically. And right now, Ricky Collins is in the lead, followed very closely by Steve Angeli. And look, to be honest with you, the reason is because Ricky Collins was there in the spring. He has a leg up in that regard. He's had more time in the playbook. He's had more time with the offense. And I would say that's to be expected. To your point, when we talked about this earlier, Trev, I mean, look, Steve Angeli's not going to go someplace where he doesn't have an opportunity to start. And he just kind of replaced one quarterback competition for another one. And Ricky Collins is a good quarterback, and so I think that it is an absolute battle going on over there in Syracuse. Who wins the battle is honestly inconsequential to a lot of different things, but it's very consequential to Syracuse. And they are a very quarterback-driven offense. And so whoever it is that wins that battle is going to have to throw the ball around the yard a bunch. I mean, if they average 46 passes a game, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. So we'll see. We'll kind of keep an eye out just because they're one of the opponents of Notre Dame. But right now it's a battle. It's an absolute battle. And it sounds like it's fairly neck and neck.
Vince, we're talking about an offense where the quarterback, not once, but twice, had over 60 passing attempts in a game. Do you know how crazy that is? Kyle McCord against UNLV threw the ball 63 times. And then 2 games later, threw the ball 64 times against Pitt. That was a rough game. That was a bad game. That was the game where Kyle McCord threw the ball 64 times, was picked off 5 times, and didn't throw a touchdown. That was a rough matchup for them. I completely forgot that's what that game was. I remember the Pitt game being a very lopsided affair. I just forgot that it's because Kyle McCord turned the ball over 5 times, unfortunately. So,
and that's what happens when you throw the ball as much as they do. You know what I mean? I mean, that is what did Lou Holtz say? 3 things happen when you throw the ball, 2 of them are bad. I mean, that's reality. And you take those chances when you chuck it around the yard as much as they do. And can Ricky Collins or Steve Angeli do what Kyle McCord did last year? I mean, that remains to be seen. as far as I'm concerned. And that's going to have a lot to do with the new pass catchers that Syracuse is going to have, because guys either graduated or they went to different programs. And so you've got a ton of new talent at wide receiver.
That is probably the biggest question that I have with them. It's either their pass catchers or their offensive line. But look, they lost their top 4 pass catchers from last year. They lost Jackson Meeks. He was their leading wide receiver last year. He was their 1,000-yard guy, 78 catches, 7 touchdowns. They lost Trevor Pena to the portal. He's now at Penn State. 84 catches, 941 yards, 9 touchdowns. They lost their tight end, Aronde Gadsden. He's also now in the NFL. He's with the Los Angeles Chargers. He was their 3rd leading receiver. And then running back LaQuinn Allen, who's also now in the NFL, was their 5th leading receiver. So when you lose 4 of your 5 top pass catchers, who do you have coming back? Off the cusp, they have Darrell Gill coming back, and he was their 4th leading receiver last year. He had 31 catches, 570 yards, 18.4 yards per catch, 2 touchdowns. He was kind of their big play weapon. You go through and you look at what he did last year. I mean, he's 6'3", he's $175, so he's definitely their down the field threat. And so, can he have a breakout season? They also picked up Jonte Cook from the transfer portal. Now, he was with Texas for 2023 and 2024. He didn't do much with them. He hasn't lived up to his recruiting hype yet, but he's getting there. And so, can he be an impact player for the Syracuse offense? He had 2 touchdown catches last year, but they were both against UTSA. And so I'm going to be very curious to see, are they going to be able to replace the production lost from Trevor Pena entering the portal and Jackson Meeks going off to the NFL? I don't know the answer to that. Regardless of who starts at quarterback for Syracuse, Ricky Collins has a very high ceiling, but we know what Steve Angeli can do as well. If Steve Angeli has weapons, like we saw in the Sun Bowl, I think that's going to be interesting to see what he can do with that style of offense. I think just naturally, because of the system he's in, whatever quarterback starts for Syracuse is going to put up a lot of numbers. But a lot of that is going to be dictated, Vince, to your point, by the guys that they're throwing to. And sure, I don't have a lot of confidence in the pass catchers that they have coming back. That's my issue.
Yeah, no, which makes perfect sense. I mean, look, they could prove us all wrong, and they could, dominate offensively and put up big numbers again and all of those different things. And you beat me to the punch there, Trevor. But I just I'm not confident that they're going to be able to do that. And a lot of that has to do with the next group that we're going to talk about, and that's the offensive line.
This group for me is probably the biggest question mark on the team now that I think about it. Last year, the offensive line did not perform well. They were number 84 in the country in sacks allowed. They allowed 29 sacks in 13 games. But it's not just their performance overall from last year. I'm also concerned about the makeup of their offensive line. You go through and you break down their depth chart. 4 of their 5 projected starters right now in our lads are transfers. That is tricky. There are some position units where you can get away from being a transfer portal dominant unit. Secondary is a concern, but not overly concerning. There's a good chance that 2 of the 3 starting wide receivers at Notre Dame are going to be transfer portal guys. 2 of the 3 starting wide receivers for Notre Dame last year were transfer portal guys. It doesn't make me crazy nervous, but it does along the offensive line. You have 4 guys that really started playing together as a cohesive unit this summer because some of the transfer guys that they got in came into the spring portal. Very nervous to see what they have going on. I mean, after last season, they lost their left guard, Jacob Branford. They lost their center, Jean-Ray Reed, who actually is now at USC. So Notre Dame will play against him, just not with Syracuse. They also lost their right tackle, Savion Washington. And so you go through and you look at what they're able to do. My biggest concern with them, yes, pass protection is an issue. Last year, they gave up 29 sacks. Some of that, Kyle McCord was not the most athletic passer in the world last year. I don't know if I'd go as far as to call him like a Jack Cohn statue. But I'll say this. Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins are athletic enough to get them out of certain situations. We saw Steve Angeli do that. Ricky Collins, we saw him do that back in high school. Ricky Collins is kind of more of like a Kenny Minchie type athlete. Like he's not a dual threat guy by any means, but athletic enough to get out of pressure. Kyle McCord was not on the athletic level of Steve Angeli nor Ricky Collins. So I think that might help some things a little bit. But I'll say this. If they don't figure out how to become a better run blocking team, whoever starts for them at quarterback is going to have a really, really hard time. And Syracuse is going to have a really difficult time having the season that Fran Brown is going to want to have in year 2. Because if they're not able to establish any sort of ground game, that's going to be a really long year for them. Really long year. A first-time starter. Why, Vince, why are we so confident that whoever starts at quarterback for Notre Dame is going to have a decent season?
Because the O-line and the wide receivers.
And they have a run game.
And a running game. Yeah, right.
Like, it comes down to the tools that whatever starting quarterback takes over has at their disposal. That's my biggest concern for Syracuse. I know the quarterback battle is going to draw the most headlines, and, they get Steve Angeli from Notre Dame and Ricky Collins from LSU. Got to find a way to run the football. They have to be a better running team, because if they're not, it's going to be a really long season offensively for Jeff Nixon in year 2.
Agreed. Let's flip it over to the other side of the football, Trev, and let's talk a little bit of defense. Obviously, the defensive coordinator, Elijah Robinson, is also going into year 2 with the new staff coming in last year. And the defense left a little bit to be desired, I would say, last year. They were scoring a lot of points on offense, but I also felt like they were giving up a lot of points on defense.
Yeah, a lot left to be desired is a very nice way of putting it, Vince. They were bad last year. You have a first-time starter quarterback. You cannot with a transfer portal offensive line and a completely new group of pass catchers outside of Darryl Gill and a struggling run game, you can't ask this offense to get into a shootout every single week, especially with the schedule that they have coming up. We're getting to that in a second, but that is a mean schedule, by the way. Defense has to be better.
We'll definitely get to the schedule. It's going to be tough.
Defense has to be better. Last season, they gave up 41 points to UNLV, 41 points to Pitt, 37 points to Boston College, 38 points to Miami, and 35 points to Washington State. You can't rely on what we just got done talking about with the offense. They can't be counted on to then score 42 points or above every single week. That's going to be a tall order. Last season, Syracuse's defense, they ranked 96th in the country in scoring defense. They ranked 82nd in the country in pass defense. They gave up 227.3 yards per game. They gave up 150.2 rushing yards a game, which ranked 69th in the country. So we're talking about a group that in essentially the 3 major categories of defensive stats, they were outside of the top 60. And that is an area that absolutely has to improve this year, or else this is going to be a rough one.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, the defense as a whole was just rough. They didn't rank in anything lower than 69 in team defensive stats. That has to be better, especially when the offense is probably not going to be putting up the prolific numbers that they did last year. Specifically, let's talk secondary. They're going to have some new guys in the secondary. One is a true freshman. Another is a transfer from Georgia.
Yeah, their secondary has the opportunity to be better than what it was last year because of some of the new faces. Demetrius Samuel Jr., he's expected to start at cornerback. He's a true freshman. He's 6'1". He's a $195. According to On3, he was a top 20 prospect in the state of Florida coming out of high school. From everything that I read, hearing decent things about him out of camp, it's a lot of just he's a true freshman, but athletically he's a really good player. And then opposite of him is going to be Chris Peel. And he transferred from Georgia. He's expected to start at the other cornerback slot. He didn't play a whole lot at Georgia last year. There was a good amount of stuff in front of him too, good amount of players in front of him. But their secondary this year could take a jump. Now, we're talking about a secondary that could take a jump from just not being the number 82nd ranked pass defense in the country. They're going to be facing some pretty good passing offenses this year. But this is a unit that could potentially take a jump. They have experience coming back at the safety position. They bring back their free safety, Deuce Chestnut. They also bring back Devin Grant, who's also their nickelback. But last year, again, they lost a lot. Clarence Lewis graduated. Marcellus Barnes graduated. Jaden Bellamy one of their corners who led the team in interceptions last year. He entered the transfer portal. So they had some losses there as well. But I do think this unit has the potential to be better than what they were last year. Not only do they have the potential, but they will have to be better than what they were last year.
So with all of the eye-opening numbers defensively, you would assume that there has to be improvement on the front, and the front four definitely has to improve, Trev.
Yeah, I mean, when you go through and you look at what they lost again, their biggest loss up front was probably Murad Watson, biggest loss in the transfer portal. He's a big-bodied guy. I mean, I believe he transferred to Texas, but we're talking to somebody. He was a big run stuffer. He was like 6'3", 6'4", 313 pounds, big body in the middle. And then they lost their most productive edge rusher in Fadil Diggs. He's gone as well. He led the team in sacks at 7.5. He also led the team in tackles for a loss. He had 14 tackles for a loss last season. He now plays for the New Orleans Saints. So the losses on the defensive line continue to stack up for Syracuse. They also lost two of their best linebackers in Justin Barron and Marlowe Wax. They were, if I look at these stats correctly, they were some of the leading tacklers on the team from last season. Deuce Chestnut returns. He's a free safety. He also led the team in tackles. He was their second leading tackler. So defensive line, though, they're going to need some players to step up. King Joseph Edwards is a returning player for them. He is a pure edge rusher. He's 6'4". He's 225 pounds. He's going to have a big year for him. Last year, he ripped off 3 sacks, and then I believe he was also – okay, so all of his tackles for a loss were his sacks. He had 3 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks. But this defensive line unit is going to have to be better. Again, they're one of the biggest reasons why their rush defense wasn't as good as what it was. It's also a reason why their pass defense just wasn't effective. They weren't able to generate enough pressure. You know, their team leader in sacks last season had 7.5. Their next closest was a linebacker with 4.5. Their defensive line last year combined to have 14 and a half sacks last year across their entire D-line. That's not interior guys. That's not edge rushing guys. That is the defensive line unit as a whole. Yeah, the operation as a whole on the defensive line is going to have to take that next step, because if they don't, it's going to be a really long road for them. And I know I'm going to sound like a broken record saying it. Vince, we might as well just bring up their schedule now.
Done.
Because you look at what this team has to do this year and who they have to play. This is a mean schedule. You go and you look at a team like Syracuse, and they're out of conference games. Yes, they play UConn and Colgate out of conference. They also play Tennessee and Notre Dame out of conference. Vince, when you look at this schedule initially, man, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, so there are a lot of losable games here, was my first thought when I took a look at it, to be honest with you, because, when you open up against Tennessee, now, thankfully for Syracuse, first of all, that's a lot of orange in the stadium, and that's going to be gross. But just wanted to throw that out there. But opening up against Tennessee at a neutral site is the only benefit that they're going to have, but that is going to be a welcome to the 25 season for Syracuse in probably not the most hospitable way that they're looking for. So, that's a tough way to open up your year. Then obviously you get UConn, you get Colgate. Okay, those are probably some layups, but then they have to travel to Clemson, which is obviously not going to be a situation where Syracuse is probably favored. Then they get Duke at home, and Duke won 9 games last year. Then they get to travel down to Dallas, where they face off with SMU, who obviously was a playoff team last year. And then they get to limp into a bye week, most likely, after that stretch of Clemson, Duke, and SMU. And then they have Pitt. And honestly, and Pitt's as much of an enigma in the ACC as anybody. What are they going to be like by October 18th when they travel up to the Dome to take on Syracuse? Like, what is that going to look like? What is that Pitt team going to look like? Then they get to travel down to Georgia Tech, which is not going to be an easy game. I think Georgia Tech is going to be better than their 7-6 record of last year. God only knows what North Carolina is going to be this year under Bill Belichick on Halloween, which I think is probably an apt day to play that game. But who knows what that's going to look like. Then they get to travel to Miami. Then they get another bye week, and then they travel to Notre Dame. Like, that is a kind of a murderer's row schedule, to be honest with you. You and I looked at it prior to the show, and you're like, yeah, there's 7 games here that are probably losses. And when you go into a season like this and you're already predicting a losing season, essentially, and then there's some toss-up games as well, that's not great, especially going into year 2 when you had so much success year 1. Look, Fran Brown's not going to get fired after 2 years, obviously, because he has that year 1 in his back pocket. But I just think they're going to come back to the pack pretty significantly in year 2.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their schedule in its entirety. There are 7 very losable games on here. I mean, you got Tennessee at a neutral site, on the road against Clemson, on the road against SMU, home against Pitt, at Georgia Tech, at Miami, at Notre Dame. There are 7 very potential losses right there. Duke is a 9-win team. That's not a gimme. North Carolina, to your point, we don't know what they're going to be this year, but that's not potentially a gimme. And then their final game of the regular season is at home against Boston College, and that's not a gimme game either because you have another head coach in Bill O'Brien that is also going into year 2. And if I was just kind of comparing apples to apples here, I like the skilled talent a lot better at Boston College than I do right now at Syracuse. I have significantly less questions about, Turbo Richard and some of the guys on Boston College roster than I do about Darryl Gill and Jonte Cook and who the running back is going to be for Syracuse. And so once you kind of break into what this schedule is, like, this is a hard ACC schedule. And then when you throw in on top of it, your 2 out-of-conference games are Notre Dame and Tennessee. That's rough. That is a hard schedule. The Big Ten needs to take notes and look at this schedule and look at what an out-of-conference schedule looks like outside of Ohio State. This is tough. And when you look at it, it's one of those where I know we like to talk about toughest stretches in this, Vince. I think it would kind of be a cop-out to say from, September 27th to November 29th, but this is rough, man. I mean, if I was looking at it legitimately, their season will be made from September 20th to October 4th when they have at Clemson, home against Duke, at SMU. You get no bye week in there. You're on the road twice. I mean, Syracuse only placed 2 teams last year who had losing records. And one of those was North Carolina at 6-7. Now, we don't know what we don't know what they're going to be this year, to your point. But none of these games I look at, and they are not gimmies.
That's correct. They are not gimmies, and there's enough question marks on this team right now as to where you can't look at any of these games as gimmies. We just don't. We don't know who the quarterback is going to be. We don't know how effective the wide receiving core is going to be. We don't know what the offensive line is going to look like, or how they're going to play. We know they're going to look like. We just don't know how they're going to play, right? We don't know if the front is going to be better. There's way too many question marks about Syracuse right now, and it's not a reload situation. They're looking a rebuild squarely in the face. And they are working squarely in the portal right now in year 2 of Fran Brown. You expect that in year 1, but they're back at it in year 2. And so they're going to have to get their legs underneath them and just get a better foundation moving forward. And they were not gifted with a schedule that is going to allow them to kind of ease into year 2. I think that's the biggest thing here. So, Trev, I'm going to ask your prediction here. What do you have them going? How do you see this season playing out for Syracuse?
This is tough because I like Fran Brown. And it was cool to see Syracuse go 10-3 last year. But their schedule from last year compared to this year is significantly more difficult. I'm sorry, their schedule this year compared to last year is significantly more difficult. I mean, last year the most difficult opponent you had on there was Miami, and you were able to scrape out a win towards the end of the year. I mean, you make the argument that if you put that Miami team on this schedule, they're probably your 3rd toughest opponent. And so I go and I look at this team as a whole. I have them going 5-7, and there's also a part of me that thinks that that might potentially be on the high end because I have them losing those 7 games that I talked about. Tennessee on a neutral site, on the road against Clemson, on the road against SMU, home against Pitt, at Georgia Tech, at Miami, at Notre Dame. So then you have toss-up games, and then if assuming they beat, I think it's safe to say that they beat UConn and Colgate, so chalk them up to 2 wins there. But then again, that means I also have them beating Duke, I have them beating North Carolina, and I have them beating Boston College. And the Duke-Boston College mix is I can't even confidently say they're going to win those.
I feel like those are 50-50 at best right now.
Yep.
Well, at least the Duke game. Maybe the Boston College game is maybe 60-40 in favor of Syracuse, but I think they're going to be better than they were last year. I just think Duke is going to be a better team than Syracuse. And again, that's a 50-50, but it's their home game. So maybe that, gives Syracuse a bit of an edge. That's tough. That's a tough one for me to predict that they're going to get Duke. But we'll see. We'll see. Honestly, a lot of it hinges on how they come out of that Clemson game. Are there going to be any injuries? Are there, how are they going to limp out of that Clemson game? What does that look like after going down to Death Valley and playing the Tigers? Like, that's going to be tough.
Yes. And in all seriousness, the Tennessee game is going to be really interesting to me because it's on a neutral site. They benefit from not getting them in Neyland Stadium. Tennessee's a question mark. They lost a lot. They've got some locker room issues. I'm not as sold on Joey Aguilar as some other people are. I mean, we're talking about a kid that threw 14 interceptions at App State, and now he's coming in to play SEC football. Yeah. That's a big question mark for me. Yeah. I'm not saying that he's going to do bad, but I'm going to be interested to see what that transition is from Nico to Joey Aguilar. But could that be a potential winnable game for Syracuse? Maybe, but I'm not going to, as you like to say, bet the mortgage on it. I don't feel confident in doing that. So like, let's say they're 2-1 going into on the road against Clemson. That stretch from September 20th to October 4th is going to be very telling. If they go 1-2 from that, I think that's a good, if they are 1-2 in that stretch between at Clemson, home against Duke, at SMU, but they're competitive in the losses.
Sure.
I think they'll have something to hang their hats on because it is a rebuilding year for Fran Brown for everything that they lost in the portal last year and a lot of question marks coming in from the transfer portal. But if it's a scenario where it's like it was against Pitt last year where they lost 41-13, it's just not that competitive. You can't afford a Stanford type loss like you had last year.
Yeah, agree with that.
And that's what makes this schedule really scary for me is if they're not competitive against Clemson and, you're kind of competitive with Duke and you lose at SMU, the wheels might completely fall off to where that North Carolina game this year on Halloween could be your Stanford loss from last year. Because unfortunately for them, that stretch of October, really coming out of the bye week, Pitt at Georgia Tech, you may potentially get a break with North Carolina and then on the road against Miami. I mean, that is brutal. That is brutal. And with the team, the thing I always get concerned about is when you have a team that is strictly made up of transfer portal players, I get worried about losing the buy-in. That's kind of where you have to trust Fran Brown and the players that he's bringing in. But again, he's bringing in players that I'm hoping remain bought in if this season doesn't go the way that they were hoping that it was. But I ultimately have them going 5-7, and there's a part of me that thinks that could be on the high end.
Yeah, I guess I'm not as optimistic as you, but only by a game. I had 4-8 kind of written down over here as far as, what I see this schedule. Look, could they, sneak up on somebody and just throw the ball all over the yard and take advantage of a poor secondary or maybe an injured secondary or something along those lines? And this is going to be tough. This is a tough bounce back year, or I should say this is going to be a tough year to follow up the kind of year that they had last year in year one. And I think Syracuse fans hopefully understand the schedule that they are going to run into this year as opposed to last year, and they understand the personnel as well. And if they do, in fact, go 4-8 this year, they give Fran Brown an opportunity to continue, because I think Fran Brown's a good coach. I agree with you on that one. Give him an opportunity to continue to build this program the way he wants to build it, and maybe not be as dependent on the portal as he had to be this year. Do you know off the top of your head how much time Ricky Collins has left as far as eligibility? Because we know that Steve Angeli has a couple of years, so they could have an actual returning quarterback, going into 26.
I'm almost positive that Ricky Collins is I think he's like a redshirt sophomore this year.
Okay, so either way, whoever ends up being the starter, they're going to have multiple years of eligibility. That's a good thing, that they're not going to keep going to the portal, for quarterbacks. Then that will allow them to potentially develop one, of their own as well to take over for whoever, wins the job this year too.
Yeah. If Fran Brown, I'll say this, if Fran Brown goes 6-6 against his schedule, I know he won't get the recognition for it, but that is like a coach of the year type of job if he goes 6-6 against his schedule. I truly mean that.
I completely agree. Because you're looking at the schedule, like, okay, where are the guaranteed wins, right? UConn, Colgate probably. I would think North Carolina, that's 3. Where do you go from there? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if he goes 6-6, that means he beats UConn, like per my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
That means he beats UConn, Colgate, Duke, North Carolina, Boston College, and then one of Tennessee, Clemson, SMU, Pitt, Georgia Tech, Miami, or Notre Dame.
Right.
I mean, that's a heck of a coaching job, compounded with everything that was lost, and a head coach going into year 2. So
yeah,
that would be a heck of a coaching job. I'm rooting for Fran Brown, but this schedule's rough.
Yeah, nope, I agree with you. So I got 4-8, you got 5-7. We will see what happens with Syracuse and what they look like, come November 22nd when they face off against Notre Dame at 3:30 on Senior Day, in South Bend, and what that looks like. Syracuse is going to be. They're going to be one of two ways, Trev. Either they're going to be riding high or they're going to be limping into that game, and so. I don't think Notre Dame overlooks them and that kind of deal, but it's going to be interesting for this Syracuse team for sure. So that's going to do it for our Syracuse prediction show. Make sure you hit the like button, the subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the premium message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. That is where you will find breaking news and all of those different things that you may not find elsewhere. And all of the information coming out of fall camp and position battles and what we're hearing and just all the fun stuff that is Notre Dame football. And we appreciate everybody hanging out with us on the Irish Breakdown podcast presented by FanDuel. It is an awesome partnership that we have with FanDuel now, and they are sponsoring our show and will be for the foreseeable future. So really looking forward to that relationship, and obviously looking forward to the Notre Dame season as well. 24 days away from opening kickoff. Trev, it's going to be here before you know it, man. Really looking forward to it. So appreciate everybody for hanging out with us again. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share with your family and friends. For Trevor, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast presented by FanDuel.